Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Byakuya seems to be one of those who don't want to be part of Hidden Leaf Village. But from what we can see, he doesn't seem to harbor any malice toward the village, he just doesn't want to become a Hidden Leaf Village ninja. He seems to view Hidden Rain Village as a new Hidden Eddy Village, much like Nagato does. Hearing this, Jiraiya sighed softly. He didn't know much about the history of the Land of Whirlpools and hadn't expected there to be so many untold stories. However, with Hidden Leaf Village and Hidden Rain Village at peace now, their relationship could gradually improve. At that moment, Jiraiya seemed to remember something, murmuring with a hint of confusion, "Minato, you say Byakuya has the Uzumaki bloodline, but why isn't his hair red? Could it be that he has another bloodline as well?" Minato shook his head. "I don't know about that, but the third Hokage must have some idea. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone out of his way to meet with Byakuya yesterday." Chapter 130, Byakuya and Kushina. After discussing for a while, Minato and Jiraiya couldn't come to any useful conclusions. For them, understanding Byakuya's background would be beneficial, but even without such information, it won't matter much to their gains. After all, even if Byakuya had some connection with the village's past ninjas, he was now a ninja of Hidden Rain Village. Exchanging a glance, the two headed toward the exchange group. At this time, Yahiko, Byakuya, and others were touring the operating room of Hidden Leaf Village Hospital. Seeing Minato approaching, Yahiko half-jokingly said, "Compared to Hidden Leaf Village, the medical standards in Hidden Rain Village are really quite basic. I wonder if we could invite some of your medical ninjas to come and exchange knowledge." Faced with Yahiko's request for medical ninjas, Minato neither agreed nor immediately refused. The ninjas at Hidden Leaf Village Hospital are all under Lady Tsunada's command. If you want them to be dispatched, I would need to inform her first. Once I get her permission, I'll send a few medical ninjas over. "I see." A trace of disappointment flashed in Yahiko's eyes. He knew Minato wouldn't easily lend out their medical ninjas. Although Yahiko and Minato were technically like juniors and seniors due to their shared teacher, Jiraiya, they were not particularly close. Their relationship was maintained primarily through the connection with Jiraiya. Allowing the exchange group to visit Hidden Leaf Village was also part of the preparation for the upcoming alliance negotiations. Hidden Leaf Village couldn't possibly share everything with Hidden Rain Village without reservation. Such caution was necessary between ninja villages. In the time that followed, Minato led the exchange group on a tour of the entire Hidden Leaf Village Hospital. While he spoke of mutual exchange, he consistently emphasized the importance of cooperation. Hidden Leaf Village wasn't unwilling to share technology, but Hidden Rain Village would need to join Hidden Leaf Village's alliance system, preferably becoming an ally under Hidden Leaf Village's influence, similar to Hidden Sand Village. After the morning exchange ended, Minato didn't continue showing Yahiko and the others around. Instead, he extended a personal invitation to Yahiko, Byakuya, and Konan to visit his home, to strengthen the bond between them as fellow students of Jiraiya. Faced with such an invitation, Yahiko and Konan naturally had no reason to refuse. Byakuya also didn't turn down Minato's invitation. After being in Hidden Leaf Village for so many days, he finally had the chance to meet the wife of the Hokage, Kushina Uzumaki. Kushina wasn't just any ordinary ninja. Besides being a descendant of the Uzumaki clan, she was also the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. While a Jinchuriki might not be able to defeat the 5 Kage in a combat sense, their destructive power definitely surpassed that of the Kage. If a well-trained squad were to infiltrate enemy territory, they could potentially destroy an entire village within hours. In the ninja world, Jinchuriki were undoubtedly considered on the level of nuclear weapons. The biggest difference between the 5 great ninja villages and other villages lies in this fact: having a Jinchuriki makes an enormous difference. It wasn't long before the group arrived at the Namikaze residence. Unlike the large areas occupied by other ninja clans, the Namikaze residence was surprisingly small, just a single, modest house, not much different from those of ordinary Chunin. This was expected, considering Minato Namikaze's status as the Hokage of commoner origins. Although Minato was currently the leader of Hidden Leaf Village, his background couldn't compare to that of the noble clans. Before even stepping into the Namikaze residence, Byakuya sensed several chakra signatures and pinpointed their locations. The weaker signatures were likely the Anbu assigned to protect Kushina, and the most prominent one was undoubtedly Kushina Uzumaki herself. Besides them, there was also the gloomy chakra of Kakashi. After the deaths of Obito and Rin, this ninja, who was once considered evenly matched with others in the ninja world, was now on the edge of darkness. Thinking of this, Byakuya glanced at the Hokage rock on the cliff, his gaze seemingly traversing through time and space, as if he could see Obito and Black Zetsu hiding in the shadows of Hidden Leaf Village. They were probably watching him now, so he shouldn't hold back in his performance. The identity of the Uzumaki descendants still needed to be maintained. What should he do next to provoke Kushina Uzumaki? After a moment's reflection, Byakuya followed Minato into the residence. Kushina Uzumaki, wearing casual home attire and with her vibrant red hair, was sitting on the sofa. Observing Kushina, Byakuya silently assessed her strength. Kushina was likely at the level of a Jonin, and with the 9 tails inside her, she could be as strong as a Kage. However, if she couldn't harmonize with the 9 tails, her strength might not surpass that of Killer Bee of the 8 tails. At this moment, Kushina noticed Byakuya and her gaze shifted towards him. After scanning the room, Kushina confirmed Byakuya's identity. Apart from the Uchiha and Hyuga clans, only the Uzumaki ninjas had such strong sensory abilities. So, the boy in front of her must be Byakuya. Yet, perhaps due to a woman's intuition, Kushina found Byakuya's gaze somewhat peculiar. However, they had never met before. Strange as it was, Kushina still stood up to greet her guests. As disciples of Jiraiya, she needed to help Minato build good relations. After lunch, Minato and Yahiko began discussing national affairs, while Byakuya slowly rose and stepped outside. On a stone bench outside, Kushina had been waiting for him. Kushina had many questions for this clan member whom she had only heard about. Sitting down, Byakuya, with a blank expression, greeted the crimson-haired Kunoichi. "Greetings, Lady Hokage. Is there something you need from me? If it's not very important, there's no need to continue. If it's crucial, you can discuss it directly with Yahiko." Kushina was slightly taken aback by Byakuya's distant demeanor. "I just wanted to meet a fellow clansman." "Byakuya, you must be a Uzumaki descendant as well, I can sense it from your chakra." Byakuya considered his persona for a moment and then let a smirk appear at the corner of his mouth. "Well, never mind then. I used to be a Uzumaki ninja, but not anymore. Now I'm a ninja of Hidden Rain Village. The Uzumaki clan has no connection with us, including you." "Why?" Kushina narrowed her eyes, puzzled by why Byakuya wanted to sever their connection. Sensing her confusion, Byakuya replied with a hint of coldness, "Lady Kushina, you are a noble Hokage's wife, which is quite different from us Uzumaki remnants." Upon hearing the term remnants, Kushina's frown deepened, feeling a sharp sting in her heart. Byakuya, like his former self, harbored significant resentment towards Hidden Leaf Village, even if he didn't openly express it. Kushina sighed lightly and said, "Byakuya, you must still harbor a grudge over the events from back then. I used to think the same way. But over the past few days, I've investigated the details of what happened. After our village was attacked, Hidden Leaf Village did intend to provide support, but by the time their reinforcements arrived, it was already too late." Byakuya shook his head slightly and fixed his gaze on Kushina's eyes. The fall of the Uzumaki village was due to the weakness of the Uzumaki clan itself. What does that have to do with Hidden Leaf Village? Allies are not babysitters, they have no obligation to continuously protect Hidden Leaf Village. Then why? Kushina asked, confused, looking at Byakuya. Byakuya glanced at Kushina and said, "The destruction of the Uzumaki clan is not Hidden Leaf Village's fault, but the fact that they took advantage of our misfortune is unforgivable to us Uzumaki remnants. Why do you think we haven't sought Hidden Leaf Village's help all these years for no reason?" He paused before answering directly, "It's because our clanswoman, Kushina, was forced to become a Jinchuriki of Hidden Leaf Village. Lady Kushina, I've heard about your past and know how Hidden Leaf Village ninjas mistreated you. But just like how you seem to have truly become a Hidden Leaf Village ninja, which disappoints me, you might be under the illusion that what those people showed you was the truth rather than a carefully crafted lie to keep you content as the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki." Hearing this, Kushina fell silent, realizing that Byakuya's words were true. What Hidden Leaf Village's higher-ups told her might indeed have been lies. However, the true reason she accepted Hidden Leaf Village wasn't the will of fire but Minato. Yet, her actions seemed to have betrayed the clan members who remained in exile. But why should this child speak ill of Lady Mito? With this thought, Kushina stood up, glaring at Byakuya. Her back was surrounded by a flurry of golden chains. Chapter 131, Divergence. The adamantine sealing chains is a unique sealing technique of the Uzumaki clan, capable of restraining a ninja and even temporarily sealing a tailed beast. When Kushina used the adamantine sealing chains, Byakuya remained calm before several dark golden chains appeared behind him, blocking Kushina's attack. Seeing this, Kushina fully confirmed Byakuya's identity. Byakuya was indeed a genuine descendant of the Uzumaki clan, as only the Uzumaki lineage could master such an advanced sealing technique like the adamantine sealing chains. Byakuya stared at Kushina before saying, "Is the wife of the Hokage planning to take action against Hidden Rain Village?" At this moment, Kushina somewhat regretted her impulsiveness. She quickly retracted the adamantine sealing chains and said with displeasure, "I just can't stand you slandering Lady Mito. What I said was the truth." Byakuya also withdrew his dark golden chains and countered, "Isn't Elder Mito a Hidden Leaf Village ninja? If it weren't for Hidden Leaf Village, would she have trained you to become the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki?" Upon hearing this, Kushina unusually fell silent. She realized Byakuya's concern for her. Despite his disdain for Hidden Leaf Village, he was essentially worried about her safety and didn't want her to become the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. At that moment, inside the house, Minato Namikaze and others sensed the chakra clash outside. Using the Flying Thunder God technique, Minato arrived beside Kushina, his expression tense as he looked at Byakuya. Yahiko and Konan also arrived in the open space, their eyes filled with worry. They knew Byakuya's identity and were aware of the grudge between him and Hidden Leaf Village, but they couldn't understand why he had clashed with Kushina. Sensing the tense atmosphere, Kushina smiled, "Minato, don't worry about me. I just wanted to spar with Byakuya on sealing techniques, but I accidentally went a bit too far." Byakuya also had no intention of fighting with Kushina and chuckled, saying, "Lady Kushina and I were indeed sparring earlier, but we unintentionally disturbed you all." Hearing this, Minato's expression softened a lot. "Kushina, you're not in good health right now. You should rest more and stop sparring with Byakuya." Kushina nodded but refused to part with her clansman for now. "I know. You go and chat with Yahiko and the others. I still want to talk to Byakuya about Hidden Village." Since Kushina had said so, Minato couldn't refuse and could only take Yahiko and the others back to the living room. Before leaving, he glanced at Kushina and Byakuya. It was obvious that what had just happened wasn't as simple as sparring. But Minato trusted Kushina and believed she could handle the situation with Byakuya. After Minato left, a calm Kushina explained to Byakuya, "Byakuya, I was a bit impulsive just now. However, you also misunderstood. I became the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki voluntarily. If not for Hidden Leaf Village's protection, I might have been kidnapped by Hidden Cloud's village before I could become a Jinchuriki. After Hidden Village was destroyed, we, who had nowhere to go, could only seek refuge in other ninja villages. Rather than becoming a test subject in a hostile village, it was better to become a Jinchuriki to protect Hidden Leaf Village." "A Jinchuriki to protect Hidden Leaf Village, huh?" Byakuya frowned and then said, "Before coming to Hidden Leaf Village, I was actually thinking of bringing you back to Hidden Rain Village. After all, not all clan members were as lucky as you." Kushina's expression changed slightly, and she asked, "You mean the other clan members are living badly?" Byakuya nodded and said, "Nagato's parents died a long time ago. The killers were ninjas who invaded the Land of Rain. As for Akon, Karen's mother, she was used as a human medicine. If I hadn't found her, she might have already been dead." After hearing about Nagato and Karen's experiences, Kushina sighed in her heart. She had always thought that her childhood experiences were painful enough, but now she realized that the fate of other members of her clan was even more tragic. In contrast, she was the luckiest one. Thinking of this, Kushina suddenly looked at Byakuya. She wanted to know about Byakuya's experiences. Byakuya guessed Kushina's thoughts and shook his head, saying, "Although I have Uzumaki blood, I didn't inherit the clan's red hair. Besides losing my parents, I haven't experienced anything particularly difficult." Seeing Byakuya say this, Kushina didn't press further, but she knew that despite his words, Byakuya must have endured many hardships in secret. After a moment of contemplation, Byakuya asked Kushina, "Lady Kushina, have you really decided not to join Hidden Rain Village? Hidden Rain Village can also protect you, and there won't be any discrimination." Kushina shook her head and smiled, saying, "Byakuya, did you forget that I'm the wife of the Hokage? It's already good enough that I don't cause trouble for those old men. Do you really think they are brave enough to exploit me?" Byakuya responded, "Since you're willing to stay in Hidden Leaf Village, I have nothing more to say. But you're willing to become the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki to protect Hidden Leaf Village. Is Hidden Leaf Village really worth protecting?" At this point, Byakuya glanced toward Hidden Leaf Village in the distance, lost in thought. Kushina didn't quite understand Byakuya's words. Under Minato's leadership, Hidden Leaf Village was only getting better. She couldn't grasp why Byakuya was so pessimistic about Hidden Leaf Village's future. However, since they clearly had differing opinions about their choice of village, Kushina decided not to continue the topic, to avoid any further strain on their relationship. After visiting the Namikaze household, Byakuya, Yahiko, and Conan began heading back to their base. On the way, Yahiko, curious about the conversation between Byakuya and Kushina, asked, "Byakuya, did you and Kushina get into a fight just now?" Byakuya didn't hide the truth and nodded, saying, "Yes, we had a disagreement. We have different views on Hidden Leaf Village, and I even tried to invite her to join Hidden Rain Village, but she refused." Yahiko's expression changed slightly, feeling a bit exasperated by Byakuya's actions. It was understandable for Byakuya to hold a grudge against Hidden Leaf Village. After all, Hidden Edi Village had suffered due to Hidden Leaf Village's betrayal. Not to mention, during Hanzo's recent attack on the Akatsuki, Hidden Leaf Village's influence was also involved. But inviting Kushina to Hidden Rain Village seemed a bit excessive. Kushina was the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki and the wife of the fourth Hokage. Recruiting her in such a straightforward manner was bound to cause friction, so no wonder a conflict broke out between them. However, if Byakuya didn't cause any trouble while in Hidden Leaf Village, Yahiko might start to worry. Byakuya was not someone to remain passive, unless he was secretly plotting something bigger, like the sudden attack on Hidden Rain Village last time. With this in mind, Yahiko said to Byakuya, "Byakuya, if you really have an issue with Hidden Leaf Village, we can always return to the village now." Byakuya shook his head, glanced at Yahiko, and said, "This is my personal grudge. It has nothing to do with Hidden Rain Village or our cooperation with Hidden Leaf Village. Our collaboration with Hidden Leaf Village is more beneficial than harmful." After a brief pause, Byakuya continued, "When you meet with Minato tomorrow, remember to talk more about our reforms in the Land of Rain. Highlight the benefits of those reforms." Hearing this, Yahiko was momentarily surprised but still nodded. Promoting the Akatsuki's ideals was one of the main purposes of this trip. However, if Hidden Leaf Village strengthened through its own reforms, wouldn't that undermine Byakuya's argument that Hidden Leaf Village was a threat? Chapter 132, Obito's Clan. However, upon further reflection, Yahiko realized that while Byakuya holds grudges, he is also determined to spread the ideals of the Akatsuki, so he wouldn't miss this opportunity for exchange. Yahiko himself was full of confidence in the ideals of the Akatsuki. Since Akatsuki's measures were able to reform the backward Land of Rain, the effects in the Land of Fire's Hidden Leaf Village would likely be even better. Perhaps, they could even lead all ninja villages towards peace. Byakuya noticed Yahiko's thoughts and showed a faint smile. He was very much looking forward to seeing the fourth Hokage implement Akatsuki's ideals and was curious to see what kind of impact it would have on Hidden Leaf Village. As for whether Minato Namikaze would accept the Akatsuki's ideals, Byakuya wasn't worried in the slightest. The ideals of the Akatsuki were, after all, created by him, using the will of fire as a template, combined with some ideas from his previous life. There was no way Minato wouldn't be tempted. However, whether the others, aside from Minato, would accept it was another question entirely. After returning to their base, Yahiko and Conan didn't rest. They were busy preparing materials for their meeting with Minato Namikaze the next day. It seemed they were ready to share everything they knew. Byakuya, uninterested in writing materials, lay on his bed and reflected on his earlier meeting with Kushina. During the meeting, Byakuya had deliberately used Uzumaki Mido to provoke Kushina. Aside from establishing himself as a strong-willed Uzumaki ninja with deep grievances against Hidden Leaf Village, he also wanted to confirm if Kushina was pregnant. Kushina's son, Naruto, was destined to be the reincarnation of the Sage of Six Paths' son and the protagonist of the next era in the original story. If anything went wrong, it could easily derail future plans. Byakuya was also pondering whether there might be an opportunity to recruit Ajra and Indra under his banner. After a brief probe, Byakuya confirmed that Kushina was indeed pregnant. In about 4 to 5 months, the child of prophecy, Naruto, would be born. In the original story, the day of Naruto's birth was also known as the Night of the Nine-Tails. One of the most critical turning points. From that moment on, Hidden Leaf Village began a long decline that lasted over a decade. While Byakuya was recalling the storyline, Shiro, White Zetsu's, came to him with a message. After hearing what Shiro had to say, Byakuya furrowed his brow. In original, it is translated Fu. I then realized it is actually Tobi, White Zetsu. However, author also called Obito, Tobi later on. Hence, I used Shiro as the White Zetsu who joined the Akatsuki. Black Zetsu planned to meet him tonight to exchange information regarding Hidden Leaf Village. After some thought, Byakuya agreed to Black Zetsu's invitation. He had a lot to take care of tonight anyway. At night, after leaving a clone at the base, Byakuya made his way to the Naka River. The Naka River was a large river running through Hidden Leaf Village, with the Uchiha clan's territory located along its banks, occupying a large area. Unfortunately, despite the beautiful scenery, the location also isolated the Uchiha clan, confining them to a corner of the village, forever unable to dance in the halls of the Hokage's office. After a few minutes of waiting, Obito and Black Zetsu emerged from a vortex and appeared beside Byakuya. Byakuya approached them and asked, "Black Zetsu-senpai, when did you arrive? Are you planning to gather enough intelligence to act against Hidden Leaf Village? We arrived earlier than you and have already gathered quite a bit of useful information. However, whether to act against Hidden Leaf Village now, Lord Madara has yet to decide. That being said, your visit to Hidden Leaf Village as an envoy must have yielded some valuable intel, no?" Byakuya nodded and said, "The plan has progressed somewhat." He continued, "This morning, I tried to persuade Kushina to join Hidden Rain Village and, at the same time, looked for a way to preserve the life of the Jinchuriki. However, Kushina refused my invitation, and the plan failed before it could even begin. Next, I intend to have Yahiko promote the ideals of Akatsuki to Minato Namikaze, to create a rift between the 4th Hokage and the other leaders. If Minato becomes disillusioned with Hidden Leaf Village, he might leave the village just like Tsunade did. If that happens, we'll have an opportunity to strike at the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki." "That's it?" Obito glanced at Byakuya, a sneer forming on his face. He had expected Byakuya to come up with something clever, only to find out it was just a petty scheme of sowing discord. Promoting the Akatsuki's ideology to create discord between Minato Namikaze and the other leaders of Hidden Leaf Village? How is that even possible? Minato Namikaze might have a tendency to arrive just a step too late at crucial moments, but it's undeniable that his teacher, the 4th Hokage, possesses extraordinary personal charisma. Additionally, Minato was elected by the Jonin vote to become the 4th Hokage. Implementing reform in Hidden Leaf Village isn't something that can be done casually, and inviting Kushina to join Hidden Rain Village is even more unrealistic. What reason would Kushina have to join Hidden Rain Village? However, unlike Byakuya, Obito had already prepared a meticulous plan. Once this plan is completed, it will not only weaken Hidden Leaf Village but also alleviate the pressure of capturing the Nine-Tails. Upon hearing this, Byakuya furrowed his brow and said, "Masked man, from the way you're speaking, it seems like you have some brilliant plan? Or are you planning to take on the 4th Hokage head-on? I advise you not to walk into your own death. Your space-time ninjutsu is nowhere near the level of the 4th Hokage, lover boy." Lover boy? Hearing Byakuya's mockery, Obito might have once chosen to endure it, but after some time of adapting, he felt that he had fully assimilated Madara Uchiha's legacy and believed his strength now surpassed Byakuya's. "Do you want to test my ocular powers again? The past is the past, and the present is the present. My strength has vastly improved compared to a few months ago." Byakuya wasn't about to back down either, retorting, "If you're asking for a beating, I can certainly grant your wish. Enough, both of you. We're all allies working toward reviving the Ten-Tails, there's no need to bicker like this." Sensing the tension in the group, Black Zetsu sighed inwardly and quickly stepped in to defuse the situation. He really didn't understand why Byakuya and Obito always ended up quarreling. With Black Zetsu's intervention, Byakuya's expression softened somewhat. He then turned to Obito and asked, "Masked man, what exactly is your plan? Surely you're not planning to go straight after the 4th Hokage and the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki?" Obito nodded and replied, "Yes, I plan to take action against them, but not right now. The exact timing will be within the next few months. Just wait and see. I'll prove that I'm stronger than you." "Stronger than me?" Byakuya gave him a doubtful look, then shrugged and said, "Suit yourself, but I hope when the time comes, you don't lose to Minato Namikaze and then run crying to Black Zetsu-senpai." With that, Byakuya left the Naka River and disappeared into the shadows. Obito let out a cold snort, not bothering to respond to Byakuya, nor did he intend to reveal his plan to him. What Obito didn't know was that Byakuya was well aware of his plan and was only asking questions to confuse him. Although Byakuya didn't plan to stop the future Knight of the Nine-Tails, there were still some details he intended to change. How exactly those changes would unfold depended on the scouting work over the next few days and Minato Namikaze's attitude toward the Akatsuki's ideals. Chapter 133, The Uzumaki Shrine. After Byakuya left, Obito couldn't suppress his emotions any longer and turned to Black Zetsu. "Black Zetsu, I truly cannot stand Byakuya. When will he ever respect his elders? I'm supposed to be the executor of the Eye of the Moon plan, so why does he constantly overshadow me?" Black Zetsu glanced at Obito with a blank expression, internally mocking this brat. "Obito, the only reason Madara chose you was because you have the Mangekyo Sharingan. But I chose Byakuya because he has the ability to gather all of the tailed beasts. Right now, The Akatsuki's strength isn't significant enough to justify collecting the 9 tails prematurely. It's better to slowly weaken the 5 great shinobi villages, waiting for the right moment to strike. That way, we can collect all 9-tailed beasts in a short time and revive the 10 tails. However, Black Zetsu had no intention of stopping Obito's plan against Hidden Leaf Village. Unlike the already crippled Hidden Mist Village, Hidden Leaf Village had many ninjas stronger than Obito. The likelihood of success was slim. Rather than let Obito suffer a larger defeat later on, it would be better for him to experience some hardship in his next operation and become the true executor of the Eye of the Moon plan. Noticing that Black Zetsu hadn't responded, a flash of displeasure appeared in Obito's eyes. It used to be just Byakuya ignoring him, but now even Madara's will seemed to have infected Black Zetsu with this attitude. Was this so-called Black Zetsu really Madara's will? Obito's suspicion of Black Zetsu only lasted a moment. Madara, when he was alive, enjoyed watching projections of the Akatsuki, especially scenes of Byakuya training Nagato. Maybe Byakuya was a backup successor chosen by Madara. Unfortunately, Byakuya wasn't an Uchiha. No matter how exceptional Byakuya was, as long as he wasn't an Uchiha, he could never see the true reality of the world. In this aspect, Byakuya would never surpass him. After parting ways with Black Zetsu and Obito, Byakuya hurried toward the Uzumaki Shrine. As a descendant of the Uzumaki clan, visiting Hidden Leaf Village without paying respects at the Uzumaki Shrine would have been inappropriate. On his way, Byakuya passed by the Naka Shrine. It seemed like a meeting was taking place inside. The Uchiha clan members were probably discussing how to become Hokage or perhaps debating the Hidden Rain Village delegation. Byakuya had little interest in the clan's meetings or testing his Sharingan's perceptive abilities. After a quick glance, he quickened his pace. However, his attention was caught by 2 figures training in a nearby clearing, Shizue Uchiha and Itachi Uchiha. These 2 Uchihas, like Obito, were geniuses capable of awakening the Mangekyo Sharingan. They were practicing shuriken throwing, a highly challenging technique. After cutting the ropes holding down mechanisms, hundreds of kunai were fired simultaneously. The 2 danced like butterflies in the dark, effortlessly dodging every kunai. Seeing this, Byakuya had to admit that the Uchiha's talent was remarkable. Shizue, despite being in his early teens, already had the strength of a Jonin, and Itachi, not far behind, had almost reached the level of a Chunin. As for Obito, his development was even more absurd. His Kamui Sharingan had taken him from a top-tier ninja to Kage level. But, like Obito, these 2 Uchihas, though extraordinarily gifted, also had their own psychological issues. Shizue's problem was his naivety. He was an anomaly among the Uchiha, wanting the higher-ups and the Uchiha to coexist peacefully. He sought to be a bridge between the village and the leadership, but was instead distrusted by both sides. Even after awakening the Koto Amatsukami, a Mangekyo Sharingan ability that could change the entire situation, his naivety led him to expose it, arousing Hidden Leaf Village's suspicion. After his eye was taken, Shizue chose to jump off a cliff to avoid further conflict, inadvertently causing Itachi to spiral into darkness and thus, begin the clan's demise. As for Itachi, he was an extremely complex figure. From the age of 4, when he witnessed death for the first time, Itachi spent his life chasing after an illusory dream. Yet, in reality, he was nothing more than a puppet, never truly living for himself. That said, Itachi's life wasn't entirely without contribution. In the plan to eliminate the Uchiha clan within Hidden Leaf Village, Itachi undoubtedly made an indelible contribution. Even the reincarnated second Hokage would feel inferior upon learning of Itachi's deeds. After memorizing Itachi's chakra signature, Byakuya did not linger at the scene for long and quickly left. Tonight, besides meeting with Black Zetsu, he had another important matter to attend to, which was related to the upcoming Nine Tails night. At this moment, the keen-sensed Shizue looked in the direction where Byakuya had been and activated his teleportation jutsu. After arriving at the small forest, Shizue found no trace of anyone, which caused him to frown. Just now, he clearly sensed a gaze in this direction, but he could not find the observer. Could it have been his imagination? Thinking this, Shizue activated his Sharingan to search for any subtle clues in the surroundings. With the Sharingan's heightened perception, Shizue discovered traces on a tree trunk indicating that someone had stepped there, confirming that his earlier senses had not been mistaken. Itachi walked over, asking in puzzlement, "Shizue, was someone here just now?" Shizue nodded, his expression serious. "Someone was indeed here, but they have already left. However, I don't believe they had any malicious intent, otherwise, we would have already been attacked." As one of the strongest in the clan, Shizue was confident in his abilities. If there was a ninja that even he couldn't track, the person would have to be at least on the level of the clan leader or an elite ninja. But who could have been watching them? Was it a Jonin from the clan? Or someone else from the village? At this point, Shizue suddenly recalled seeing Byakuya a few days ago and began to speculate. Could it have been Byakuya who passed by just now? Shizue was suspicious but, without concrete evidence, he had no choice but to temporarily set aside the matter of being watched. Itachi, let's continue training. Itachi nodded lightly. He had great trust in Shizue. If Shizue said there was no problem, then there was nothing to worry about. However, Itachi was actually more curious about another matter. Shizue, as one of the clan's elite jonin, why wasn't he attending the clan meeting and instead was here practicing throwing techniques with him? As if guessing Itachi's thoughts, Shizue sighed quietly in his heart. It wasn't that he didn't want to attend the meeting, but that the content of the meetings was simply too dull. Rather than wasting time there, it was better to focus on training Itachi. Itachi was the son of the clan leader Fugaku, and if everything went as expected, he would likely be the next clan leader. As long as Itachi could rise to a position of power in the village, the Uchiha clan would be able to fully integrate into Hidden Leaf Village. On the other side, after passing through the Uchiha district, Byakuya arrived at the Uzumaki Shrine. Due to the late hour, the shrine was mostly deserted, with only a few scattered ninjas present. Easily infiltrating the Uzumaki Shrine, Byakuya's gaze fell upon the masks displayed within the shrine's hall. Each mask was grotesque, and under the dim light of night, they emitted a disturbing and ominous aura. These masks were the very reason Byakuya had come here. They were artifacts of the Uzumaki clan. When worn, they allowed the user to cast the dead demon-consuming seal, summoning the Shinigami of the ninja world. Byakuya planned to make some preparations in the Uzumaki Shrine in advance. On one hand, it was to plant spies in Hidden Leaf Village. On the other hand, it was to prepare adequately for the upcoming Nine Tails Night. Chapter 134, The Young Kabuto Yakushi. Byakuya picked up one of the grimacing masks hanging on the wall, feeling its cool surface. Other than that, there didn't seem to be anything special about it. It was almost identical to the cheap ones commonly found at roadside stalls. Could such a mask really serve as a medium for summoning the Shinigami and performing the dead demon-consuming seal technique? Byakuya had his doubts, so he began inspecting the other masks. He found that none of them seemed particularly special either. Could it be that the mask used for performing the dead demon-consuming seal had already been taken by the fourth Hokage? Upon further reflection, Byakuya realized this wasn't out of the question. A forbidden technique like the dead demon-consuming seal would likely have some restrictions. With that thought, Byakuya put down the mask in his hand and started considering other ways to intervene in the Nine Tails incident. Perhaps planting puppets or spies within the village could serve as a backup plan. At that moment, Byakuya suddenly recalled something and activated his Sharingan. Under its perceptive gaze, Byakuya finally noticed something unusual about the grimacing masks. Inside the masks, there appeared to be a small, faint inscription. Some kind of unique seal. Determined to uncover the nature of this seal, Byakuya decided to put on one of the masks himself. The moment he donned the mask, Byakuya immediately felt a faint connection with some powerful entity. Unsurprisingly, this entity was most likely the Shinigami worshipped by the Uzumaki clan. Byakuya didn't know much about the Shinigami worshipped by the Uzumaki. He only knew that the dead demon-consuming seal, which involved the Shinigami, was an extremely powerful sealing technique. It could seal the souls of both the user and the target into the belly of the Shinigami, preventing them from being summoned through techniques like Hado Tensei. Not only that, but the dead demon-consuming seal could also seal tailed beasts in a very short amount of time. Besides the Shinigami, there were several other strange entities in the ninja world, such as the Box of Ultimate Bliss in Hidden Grass Village's Hazuki Castle, the Morio of the Land of Demons with its negative chakra, and the Jashin that Hidan worshipped. However, none of these eerie entities could compare to the Rinnegan, which was the power of the God Tree. Shaking off his wandering thoughts, Byakuya attempted to communicate with the Shinigami. If the Shinigami possessed self-awareness, perhaps they could strike a deal. Unfortunately, no matter how Byakuya tried to communicate, the Shinigami didn't respond at all. It seemed that only by performing the dead demon-consuming seal could he establish further contact with the Shinigami. Should he try using the dead demon-consuming seal now? Byakuya gently shook his head. He had no intention of risking his own life for this. Not to mention the deadly consequences of using the dead demon-consuming seal, the attention it would draw from other ninjas alone was enough to make it dangerous. For now, Byakuya had to think of another approach or perhaps take one of the Shinigami masks back to the village for study. The problem was, there seemed to be only one Shinigami mask, and taking it would mean it would no longer be available. Suddenly, Byakuya had an idea. He picked up the other grimacing masks and tried them on one by one. After testing several, his expression became strange. It seemed that all the masks in the Uzumaki shrine had the ability to communicate with the Shinigami and perform the dead demon-consuming seal. Moreover, it appeared that all these masks communicated with the same Shinigami. With that realization, Byakuya fell into deep thought, then came up with a bold plan. Since Orochimaru was able to deceive the Shinigami to undo the dead demon-consuming seal, perhaps Byakuya could also modify the Shinigami using these seals. After all, from what was shown in the original work, the Shinigami seemed more like a rigid force rather than a true deity. In terms of power, it was far inferior to the Sage of Six Paths and Kaguya Otsutsuki. With this plan in mind, Byakuya chose an inconspicuous mask from the wall and left the Uzumaki shrine. Although the clone he left behind could easily pass for him, it could fool Yahiko and the others but not Black Zetsu or Obito. If Black Zetsu discovered his secret actions, things would become complicated. After all, Byakuya still aimed to position himself as the mastermind behind Black Zetsu. His movements needed to remain cautious and discreet. After leaving the Uzumaki shrine, Byakuya disguised himself as a passerby and wandered through the alleys of Hidden Leaf Village, hoping to run into some root operatives. If the opportunity arose, he could beat them up and extract some benefits from them. After all, with the leverage he had over Denzo wouldn't dare to make a fuss about it. Unfortunately, no root ninjas appeared, and Byakuya lost his chance to make some easy gains. It seemed that after the fourth Hokage took power, Root lost many of its elite members, and Denzo had become much more subdued, no longer stirring up trouble. However, Byakuya's wanderings in the alleys weren't entirely fruitless. At the very least, he spotted a child wearing glasses, standing alone on the second floor of an orphanage, gazing forlornly at the bustling street as if waiting for someone's return. Judging by the boy's appearance and age, this child was most likely Kabuto Yakushi. In Byakuya's memory, Kabuto Yakushi was an orphan taken in by Hidden Leaf Village after the Battle of Kikyo Pass and later became one of the instigators of the Fourth Great Ninja War due to various fortuitous circumstances. A potential asset like this was not something Byakuya would overlook. After a brief contemplation, Byakuya used teleportation jutsu to appear behind Kabuto and began to look at the Hidden Leaf Village streets alongside him. Kabuto didn't notice Byakuya's presence as he only felt a chill pass by and then leaned over the balcony, eagerly waiting for the return of the orphanage's director. The director, named Nano Yakushi, was a kind and beautiful older sister. She not only established the orphanage but also kindly adopted the orphans, giving them a meaningful name and providing them with a warm home. However, maintaining the orphanage required a lot of money. Despite the director's tireless efforts, she still couldn't fill the financial gap, and many children suffered from malnutrition due to a lack of food. Kabuto had considered going out to work with the director but was firmly rejected. To the director, a child like him was too young to work early. She wanted him to stay healthy in the orphanage while she handled everything else. Kabuto had thought about secretly finding work outside, but no one would hire him, let alone pay him. With a sigh, Kabuto muttered to himself, if only I could make a lot of money, then the director wouldn't have to work so hard every day. At that moment, a pair of hands appeared on Kabuto's shoulders, and a cold voice spoke in his ear, "Is making a lot of money your dream?" Startled, Kabuto turned around and saw a figure wearing a grimacing mask. Since the figure had appeared in his room without him noticing, they must be a ninja, and Kabuto had always been very cautious around ninjas. But the figure's words seemed to hold a magical power that captivated his heart, making him ask, "Who are you? Do you have a way to help me make a lot of money?" Byakuya, seeing through the young Kabuto, smiled and said, "Of course I do. But the prerequisite is that you work for me, become my subordinate, and in return, I will help you solve your problems." Kabuto hesitated for a moment but then saw Byakuya produce a stack of money and immediately nodded. The figure might be deceiving him, but money was not. The orphanage and the director desperately needed money, and this could very well be the only job opportunity Kabuto could find in the next few years. Chapter 135, Stalled Progress. The recruitment of Kabuto Yakushi went very smoothly. Byakuya spent just a few thousand ryo to bring one of the future major antagonists of the ninja world into his ranks. However, Kabuto's current strength was too weak for the system to grant any rewards. But Byakuya was quite pleased at the prospect of Kabuto's future potential and eagerly anticipated the benefits Kabuto might bring in the future. Kabuto, having received the money, was visibly shocked. He hadn't expected the money to be real. While a few thousand ryo might be just a small commission for a ninja, it was a significant sum for an orphanage. With this money, the orphanage could keep going for another month. However, handing the money directly to the director would be problematic, as it might raise suspicions and prompt questions. And so, Kabuto decided to present the money as a donation from a kind-hearted person. This way, the director would likely accept it without questioning its origins. With this plan in mind, Kabuto returned the money to Byakuya and quietly asked, "Can this money be given directly to the orphanage?" Byakuya nodded in agreement, impressed by Kabuto's consideration. Despite his young age, Kabuto had displayed intelligence far beyond his peers, thoroughly thinking through the issue. The only oversight was his lack of awareness of Byakuya's true identity and the potential dangers involved. After leaving the money in the orphanage's mailbox and leaving behind a spore clone of himself with Kabuto, Byakuya quickly returned to the Hidden Rain Village base, ending a busy day. In the following days, Byakuya did not join Yahiko and the others for meetings at the Hokage building. Instead, he stayed in the base, focusing on studying the Shinigami mask he had brought back and secretly contacting Kabuto through his spore technique, aiming to train Kabuto as an agent embedded in Hidden Leaf Village. Kabuto's learning ability was impressive. Within a few days, he mastered many things, including the method of chakra refinement. However, Byakuya did not teach him any ninjutsu or taijutsu. Kabuto was an orphan from the orphanage, which served as a reserve for the root. Given Kabuto's talent, it was highly likely he would be valued by Denzo and sent to the root base for further training, mirroring his fate in the original timeline. After enduring enough hardship and pain, the orphaned Kabuto would eventually transform into the perfect snake sage of Rishi Cave. Meanwhile, Yahiko and Minato Namikaze had made significant progress in their discussions. Although Yahiko did not agree to join Hidden Leaf Village's alliance system, they managed to reach cooperation in many areas and promised mutual support during times of war. Minato was not entirely satisfied with this outcome, but he understood that forming an alliance with the Land of Rain was not feasible in the short term. The promise of cooperation was sufficient for now. In the face of substantial commercial interests, the Land of Rain was unlikely to go to war with Hidden Leaf Village. As long as the Land of Rain did not join other factions, Hidden Leaf Village could reduce pressure from Hidden Stones Village and Hidden Clouds Village, avoiding attacks from the other major ninja villages. Moreover, Minato gained valuable reform experience from his exchanges with Yahiko. After implementing various reforms, the once impoverished Hidden Rain Village began to develop rapidly, driven by new ideas and ambitious reform directions. Aside from trade discussions between the two countries, Minato's primary concern was these reforms. As the delegation prepared to leave, Minato still felt that more discussions were needed and wished to retain them for another 10 days or so. Despite Minato's attempts to keep them, Yahiko remained firm in his decision to leave. Although he enjoyed the discussions with Minato, he could not abandon his village. The policies of the Land of Rain could only be maintained through strong measures, and staying in Hidden Leaf Village for too long would be impractical. Time passed quickly, and before long, the day of departure arrived. Under the escort of Anbu ninjas, the exchange delegation left Hidden Leaf Village's gates, exited the village, and began their journey back to the Hidden Rain Village. A few kilometers outside the village, Yahiko and Conan glanced back at Hidden Leaf Village with a hint of melancholy. Byakuya noticed their expressions and said with a smile, "What's wrong? Are you too reluctant to leave Hidden Leaf Village? If you're so enchanted by its prosperity, maybe you should just stay here and become part of Hidden Leaf Village." Yahiko shook his head and replied, "Byakuya, I was thinking about how long it will take for our village to develop to the level of Hidden Leaf Village. Will it be 5 years, 10 years, or even longer?" "Not that long." Byakuya looked back at Hidden Leaf Village with a light smile and said, "Yahiko, you should have confidence in us. Our future will definitely be better than theirs. After all, Hidden Leaf Village is already at its peak and is about to enter a decline. Our reforms may make Hidden Leaf Village stronger, but not all reforms are suitable for Hidden Leaf Village. Heck, I'm actually looking forward to Hidden Leaf Village's collapse." Yahiko looked at Byakuya with suspicion upon hearing these words. While Byakuya's confidence in his own village was a good thing, it seemed odd that he was so quick to dismiss Hidden Leaf Village's future. Nevertheless, there was some truth in what Byakuya said. There were indeed numerous problems within Hidden Leaf Village, which Yahiko had felt during his discussions with Minato Namikaze. The power held by Minato Namikaze as Hokage was evidently less than that of Yahiko as the Hidden Rain Village leader. The internal situation of Hidden Leaf Village was also much more complex than that of the Hidden Rain Village. For example, the hero Hanzo of the Salamander had been overthrown in Hidden Rain Village, while the third Hokage was still active within Hidden Leaf Village. Whatever Minato Namikaze wanted to do, he had to contend with the influence of his predecessor. However, Yahiko believed that Minato could overcome these influences and successfully apply the Hidden Rain Village's reform experiences to Hidden Leaf Village. Though Hidden Rain Village and Hidden Leaf Village were different villages, the Akatsuki's dream was to encompass the entire ninja world. Finding more like-minded companions was essential for maintaining long-lasting peace and pushing back the onset of the next war. Watching the Hidden Rain Village delegation leave, Minato Namikaze returned to the Hokage Tower. With the village's guests now gone, it was time to handle the pending administrative tasks. Though there was a ceasefire with Hidden Stones Village, Hidden Mist Village, and Hidden Clouds Village, no formal peace treaties had been signed, and true peace had not yet been achieved. To sign a peace agreement, further negotiations with these villages were necessary. Once he dealt with these matters, Minato could proceed with major reforms. During his time as a Jounin leader and now as the fourth Hokage, he had discovered many internal issues within the village. If not addressed promptly, these issues could stagnate the village's progress or even worse. Chapter 136, The Medic's only concern is money. A few weeks later, Minato no Mikaze met with envoys from Hidden Stones Village, Stone Village, and Hidden Mist Village, Mist Village. Both envoys expressed a desire for peace and were willing to make certain concessions in exchange for a peace treaty with Hidden Leaf Village. Minato naturally seized the opportunity, gaining numerous benefits from the negotiations. Although he couldn't secure land from the Land of Earth and Land of Water, he successfully drove out both countries' influence from the surrounding smaller nations, thereby expanding Hidden Leaf Village's sphere of influence. The only hidden village that had yet to make a statement was Hidden Clouds Village, Cloud Village, from the Land of Lightning. Hidden Clouds Village was the most troublesome for Minato. The Land of Lightning, where Hidden Clouds Village is located, is surrounded by the sea on three sides with rugged terrain. The fourth Raikage, A, was known for his speed and could counter the Flying Thunder God technique. Furthermore, the Eight Tails Jinchuriki was currently the strongest among all Jinchuriki, capable of fully harnessing the power of the tailed beast. However, with the situation in the ninja world gradually stabilizing, Hidden Clouds Village, even if it didn't sign a peace treaty with other villages, would not dare to act recklessly. Although the AB combination, A and B, was very strong, they were by no means invincible. After signing peace agreements with Hidden Stones Village and Hidden Mist Village and gaining significant prestige, Minato no Mikaze finally began his reforms. Minato's reforms focused on two main areas. First is breaking down barriers between village departments. He aimed to increase personnel mobility, especially in departments like the security force, which had to be restructured and not be exclusive to the Uchiha clan. Minato believed that while the second Hokage's intention in creating the security force was good, it had backfired by isolating the Uchiha clan within that department, making them outsiders to the village. To address this, it was essential to separate the Uchiha clan from the security force. To achieve this, Minato privately met with Fugaku Uchiha multiple times, persuading the Uchiha clan leader that only by leading the reformation of the security force could they dismantle other departments. Secondly, educational and scientific reforms. Minato wanted to involve ninjas in various professions and grant them the freedom to choose their careers, rather than being merely mercenaries for the daimyo and nobility. Having confirmed the direction of the reforms, Minato wasted no time. He bypassed the high-level meetings and directly announced the possible reforms at the senior ninja meeting. Upon hearing the reform details, the third Hokage and other advisory elders' expressions darkened. Minato had circumvented them and sought to alter the village's order. However, considering Minato's current prestige, they neither opposed nor rejected the reforms, tacitly accepting them. The senior ninjas of Hidden Leaf Village, upon hearing the reform details, fell into deep thought. While the fourth Hokage's proposed reforms aligned with the will of fire, ideals often clashed with reality. How many would be willing to forego their current benefits to support Minato's reforms? Most of the Uchiha senior ninjas were opposed, and the high-ranking ninjas from various departments also harbored doubts. Nevertheless, they knew they could not openly oppose Minato in this setting. Instead, they expressed support for the proposed reforms, contemplating how to maximize their own benefits from the fourth Hokage's initiative. The fourth Hokage's reforms undoubtedly caused a seismic shift within Hidden Leaf Village. Various factions silently began to take sides, each concerned about whether their interests would be affected. They aimed to outmaneuver their rivals in this reform and take the opportunity to strike while others were down. However, for the majority of Chunin and Geinin, the fourth Hokage's reforms were both closely related and unrelated to them. Whether the reforms succeeded or failed did not affect their ability to carry out missions and earn commissions from their employers. Chunin and Geinin were largely indifferent to the reforms. As an orphan from the orphanage, Kabuto Yakushi had even less interest in the fourth Hokage's reforms. Instead of wasting time on the village's internal power struggles, he preferred to focus on completing the tasks assigned by Byakuya to earn more money for his household. 2 weeks earlier, Kabuto had met the mysterious Byakuya. Under the condition of working for Byakuya in the future, Kabuto received a substantial sum of 100,000 ryo. For the orphanage, 100,000 ryo was a significant amount, enough to sustain it for several more months. Kabuto would never forget the look of astonishment on the director's face when he received the money. The director immediately questioned where the money came from, but Kabuto did not admit that it was earned from his work. He simply said that a kind-hearted person had donated to the orphanage. In Kabuto's eyes, Byakuya was indeed a genuinely good person. However, as he completed more tasks, Kabuto grew increasingly curious about Byakuya's identity. Who was Byakuya, and why did he make donations to the orphanage under the pretext of assigning tasks? After all, The tasks by Akaya assigned were often trivial, such as gathering rumors from the streets, exercising, and reading books, which seemed meaningless. Kabuto had once asked by Akaya about this, and the response was, "Your strength is still too weak to handle more difficult tasks. Focus on growing and improving, and you will find your place when the time is right." Kabuto did not take by Akaya's words to heart or worry about being exploited. As an orphan with no knowledge of his parents, being noticed and utilized by someone was a good thing, proving that he still had value. Moreover, Akaya, aside from assigning tasks, occasionally answered Kabuto's questions. Thinking of this, Kabuto, who had run several kilometers around the streets, stopped and whispered, audible only to himself. "Senpai, I've completed today's running task. When can I expect the payment?" Akaya's clone glanced at Kabuto and replied, "The money is still in the usual place. Go retrieve it when no one else is around. Tomorrow, your task is to read at the Hidden Leaf Village Library. My subordinates need to have good physical conditioning, but their cultural knowledge shouldn't be too poor." Kabuto nodded in response, "Senpai, I will make sure to complete the task." Pausing for a moment, Kabuto then curiously asked, "But why are you interested in gathering information about the reforms? Are you interested in the fourth Hokage's reforms?" Akaya nodded. "I am indeed interested in the Hokage's reforms, but not in the way you might think. I am here specifically to watch Minato Namikage's mistakes and to learn from his failures." Chapter 137, The Outer Path Golem. Upon hearing Akaya's words, Kabuto Yakushi did not argue. He quietly donned the glasses given by the orphanage director and headed back in the direction of the orphanage. Kabuto wasn't a ninja who could discern whether Akaya was boasting or not. What was certain was that Akaya was undoubtedly a highly skilled ninja, capable of maintaining communication with Kabuto without being noticed by others. Whether Akaya was a ninja from outside Hidden Leaf Village made no difference to Kabuto. Although he was currently in Hidden Leaf Village, the true culprits behind the deaths of his parents were Hidden Leaf Village and Hidden Sand Village ninjas. However, he had long since lost track of his parents' killers and was more focused on surviving with the director and his companions. Akaya, observing Kabuto's thoughts, understood that Kabuto was a very rational ninja. The only one who could stir Kabuto's emotions was Nano Yakushi, who was the source of Kabuto's emotional attachment. Without Nano as a restraint, Kabuto had lost his sense of purpose and began to act more freely. Therefore, if Akaya wanted to truly control Kabuto, he would need to address the issue through Nano Yakushi, a renowned wandering priest of the root. Dealing with Nano would be far more challenging than dealing with Kabuto. However, Nano's vulnerability happened to be the children of the orphanage. Bringing his thoughts back, Akaya did not dwell on this matter for long. Besides training Kabuto, Akaya's primary goal in staying in Hidden Leaf Village was to create disturbances within the village. Although Minato Namikage's reforms were triggering many vested interests and having a promising apprentice like Obito Uchiha, if Minato was lucky enough to complete his reforms, it would spell trouble for Hidden Rain Village. The disparity in national strength would tightly lock Hidden Rain Village's development ceiling due to Hidden Leaf Village's dominance. In Hidden Rain Village, Akaya received intelligence from his wooden clone. After briefly scanning the contents, Akaya silently used fire-style techniques to burn the scroll to ashes and discarded it into the trash bin. The intelligence from his clone detailed Minato Namikage's reforms and the reactions of various factions. It was clear that while Minato's reforms could revitalize Hidden Leaf Village, Akaya didn't need to worry about pressure from Hidden Leaf Village as long as Obito, Black Zetsu, and Denzo were around. Hidden Leaf Village was a unique village in that, if left unchecked, it would exhaust its strength through internal strife and various peace-promoting infiltrators. However, when faced with imminent threats, it would demonstrate an unimaginable cohesion. Thus, after preparing accordingly, Akaya shifted his focus to other areas, such as the development of the Akatsuki organization and interactions between Hidden Rain Village and other major nations. During these days back in Hidden Rain Village, Yahiko had met with envoys from other ninja villages multiple times. The Hidden Stones Village envoys were the most frequent. After learning that Yahiko had visited Hidden Leaf Village, Onoki had repeatedly sent envoys to discuss cooperation with Henzo of the Salamander, aiming to ensure that Hidden Rain Village maintained neutrality and did not become too aligned with Hidden Leaf Village. If Hidden Rain Village were to become an ally of Hidden Leaf Village, Hidden Leaf Village's forces could directly threaten the borders of the Land of Earth, putting immense pressure on Hidden Stones Village. In addition to Hidden Stones Village, many envoys from Hidden Sand Village had also visited Yahiko. Compared to Hidden Stones Village, Hidden Sand Village's attitude was noticeably more assertive. Although they did not make specific demands, their language was quite blunt, even referring to Hanzo as an old man with a tube sticking out of him. After sharing these interesting developments with Hanzo shook his head with a resigned expression. The only person from Hidden Sand Village who would dare call him old man was Chio, the elder puppet master from the Warring States period, who was still active today. However, thinking about his old rival's grandson becoming a rogue ninja and killing the most powerful Kazekage only added to his frustration. Hanzo's mood was always considerably better after dealing with his tasks. After finishing his work, Byakuya left the Akatsuki office and headed toward the outskirts of Hidden Rain Village. It wasn't long before Byakuya arrived at a hollow mountain where a massive, withered golem stood. The golem's top half was exposed, towering several dozen meters high. Any sensory abilities that came into contact with the golem seemed to vanish as if touching an insulator. This golem was the outer shell of the Tentails, the legendary Outer Path Golem. The Outer Path Golem had many uses. It could be employed for casting jutsu, serving as a colossal shield against enemies, or used with sealing techniques to revive the Tentails and initiate the Infinite Tsukaimi, a Genjutsu that would cover the entire ninja world. However, Byakuya wasn't here for these purposes. He was here for the Magic Lantern Body Technique. This technique, recorded in the Rinnegan, allowed for communication across most of the ninja world, making it an incredibly powerful tool for intelligence sharing and wartime command. Upon entering the Outer Path Golem, Byakuya looked at Nagato, who was nearby, and asked, "Nagato-senpai, has the simplified version of the Magic Lantern Body Technique been completed?" Nagato, sporting dark circles under his eyes, appeared. He had thought that creating the 6 paths of pain would give him some respite, but instead, the existence of the 6 paths had made him even more exhausted. Managing multiple puppets simultaneously drained him immensely. Moreover, Byakuya had even tasked him with developing a jutsu. With his talent for jutsu, it was challenging enough to optimize techniques, let alone create them. Nevertheless, Nagato had completed Byakuya's instruction and developed the simplified version of the Magic Lantern Body Technique. Pulling out a handful of rings from his pocket, Nagato handed them to Byakuya while asking, "By wearing these rings, one can communicate with other ninjas holding rings up to several hundred kilometers away. But why do you need 10 rings?" Byakuya, not hiding anything, replied with a smile, "I've been scouting for several powerful ninjas recently. I plan to establish a squad of elite jonin within the organization." Nagato was puzzled and then thought about the new member, Pikazu. Pikazu had become the Akatsuki's financial manager and indeed possessed elite jonin level strength. He also excelled in assassination missions. However, Nagato felt that Byakuya's request for the Magic Lantern Body Technique and the formation of an elite jonin squad was not just for protecting Hidden Rain Village but was more likely aimed at facilitating espionage and potential actions against surrounding small nations. These efforts were intended for Hidden Rain Village's security and creating opportunities for expansion. Nagato supported the former wholeheartedly and found no reason to oppose the latter. The Akatsuki's ideology needed force to maintain, and implementing this ideology required some minor strategies. The small neighboring nations would not accept the Akatsuki's ideals or align with them unless they experienced crushing defeat and enduring pain. Chapter 138, News about Sasori of the Red Sand. Nagato was startled by his own thoughts. He considered himself a mild-mannered ninja, yet he found himself contemplating the idea that only through the deterrence of force could peace be maintained. Had he unconsciously embraced Byakuya's ideology? Reflecting on his experiences, he realized that using forceful threats was indeed a practical approach. Without sufficient strength, one couldn't compel enemies to negotiate or foster mutual understanding. However, Nagato still disliked violence and struggled with the idea of killing enemies. He preferred the exchanges and discussions about building a home with comrades. Such dark actions were better left to Byakuya. With that in mind, Nagato decided not to delve further. He would continue to follow Byakuya and Yahiko's instructions, as he always had. Questioning every detail could strain their relationship, and Yahiko might have also felt this way, leading him to not meddle in Akatsuki's affairs. "Byakuya, I have other matters to attend to, so I'll leave you now." Finding a convenient excuse, Nagato walked deeper into the cave, disappearing from Byakuya's sight. Byakuya watched Nagato's retreating figure with a slightly strange expression. Had Nagato grown so mature so quickly? Was premature maturity, especially in a ninja, such a good thing? It often led to darkness due to the world's harsh realities. Muttering to himself, Byakuya left the Outer Path Golem's cave, heading to distribute the rings to the elite ninjas in the organization. Without a doubt, Hanzo and Kakazu were eligible for a ring. As for the remaining rings, their distribution would depend on Kakazu's performance. Byakuya had tasked Kakazu with finding black market experts, aiming to recruit those who had turned rogue and possessed valuable skills. Shortly after delivering the rings to Kakazu, Byakuya received important news through one of the rings. Kakazu had managed to gather information about Sasori of the Red Sands and tracked some of his movements after several months of effort. Byakuya wasted no time and left the Land of Rain to meet Kakazu at a black market location. Kakazu was meeting with the black market's head, assessing potential targets for assassination. Despite receiving a salary from Byakuya, Kakazu was keen on earning additional income. Byakuya saw this and didn't comment. Unlike the core members of Akatsuki, the elite team he was forming was a more loosely organized group, similar to the original Akatsuki led by Nagato. The main difference was that Byakuya was the leader, not Nagato. After meeting Kakazu, Byakuya got straight to the point. "Kakazu, where is Seisaori now?" "He's in the forest ahead." Kakazu provided Seisaori's location and then asked curiously, "Boss Byakuya, why are you so interested in Seisaori of the Red Sands? His bounty isn't high, and he hasn't done anything particularly spectacular." At this time, Seisaori had not yet undertaken the feat of single-handedly destroying a nation. He had only killed a few jonin and had some notoriety in the black market. To most ninjas, Seisaori, who had killed jonin, was formidable. However, to Kakazu, who had survived from the Warring States period, Seisaori was merely a notable junior. He couldn't understand Byakuya's interest in him. Byakuya looked at Kakazu and smiled. "Seisaori hasn't done much yet, except assassinate the third Kazekage and successfully instigate the Third Shinobi World War." Upon hearing this, Kakazu's expression changed. "The missing third Kazekage was assassinated by Seisaori?" Byakuya nodded and said, "Although the exact details are unknown, the third Kazekage was likely killed by Seisaori." Facing a ninja of this level, "Mr. Kakazu, are you feeling a bit intimidated?" "Intimidated?" Kakazu didn't think so and shook his head lightly. In his long life, he had encountered 5 Kage-level ninjas before, but he had never managed to claim their bounties due to being outnumbered in the end. However, he was aware that there were differences in strength among the Kage-level ninjas. Some were adept at direct combat, while others excelled in assassination. Perhaps the third Kazekage was caught off guard and fell victim to Seisaori's attack, ultimately losing his life. Kakazu was more concerned about the bounty on Seisaori. Not only was Seisaori a challenging opponent, but the reward was also quite low. Even if he defeated Seisaori, the financial gain wouldn't be substantial unless he sold the information to a merchant and handed Seisaori over to Hidden Sand Village. Seemingly understanding Kakazu's thoughts, Byakuya continued, "It's good to have confidence, Mr. Kakazu. However, my intention in finding Seisaori is not to trouble him, but to recruit him to join us." Kakazu sighed and said, "Recruiting Seisaori is not an easy task. I don't have absolute confidence in it. Recruiting a powerful stranger was far more challenging than simply killing him." Byakuya, with an air of calm, said, "Rest assured, Mr. Kakazu. Since I have decided to recruit him, I've made the necessary preparations. You only need to stand by and prevent him from escaping." Hearing this, Kakazu showed a skeptical expression. Byakuya's talent was indeed impressive, otherwise, he wouldn't have been taken in by Hanzo. But considering his age, how strong could he really be? Kakazu thought that he would likely end up taking action himself for the sake of money. However, for the sake of earning, losing a few hearts was acceptable, as they could be replaced later. Byakuya noticed Kakazu's expression and smiled faintly. Kakazu might actually believe that Byakuya was Hanzo's disciple, but Hanzo had taken him out for training purposes. After exchanging some intelligence, the two entered the forest to locate Seisaori. During the search, Kakazu demonstrated the professional skills of a top bounty hunter. By examining the trampled plants on the ground and the human scent in the air, he pinpointed Seisaori's direction. Just as Kakazu was about to lead the way, he found that Byakuya had already moved ahead of him. Moreover, Byakuya's direction was accurate, which made Kakazu question his own tracking skills. It seemed impossible for him to be outperformed by a young man. What Kakazu didn't know was that Byakuya's regular tracking ability was far inferior to his own. However, Byakuya relied not on tracking but on sensing. He had long since pinpointed the chakra of all ninjas in the forest, making Seisaori's position stand out like a radar signal. It could only be said that the Earth Grudge Fear gave Kakazu 5 times the strength of an ordinary jonin and an immortal body. But before the bloodline of the 6 paths, the Earth Grudge Fear was still insufficiently powerful, unless it could also acquire the bloodline limit while absorbing chakra. Chapter 139, An Unexpected Battle. As Byakuya and Kakazu tracked Seisaori, the latter also noticed the 2 figures following him and a complex smile appeared on his face. During his trip to the black market, Seisaori had clearly sensed that several ninjas had been watching him with suspicious eyes. These individuals were clearly interested in him, perhaps seeking to make a name for themselves by stepping over his corpse. But making a name for oneself comes at a price. Over the years, Seisaori had killed many ninjas who came after him and turned these attackers into human puppets, adding them to his collection. The 2 ninjas trailing him now would be no exception. Upon reaching a canyon surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, Seisaori vanished from his previous location and appeared behind Byakuya and Kakazu, blocking the only exit. Seeing Kakazu, Sasori instinctively narrowed his eyes. Kakazu's reputation in the black market was comparable to that of the 5 Kage. How had such an old monster-level rogue ninja come after him? His bounty in the black market was not high. After a moment's contemplation, Sasori asked calmly, "Kakazu, did you take the black market's bounty to kill me?" Kakazu shook his head and said, "I have no interest in you, but my boss is interested in you. If you have any questions, you should ask him." "Boss?" Sasori frowned slightly and turned his attention to Byakuya. If Kakazu hadn't mentioned it, he would have almost forgotten that there was another ninja nearby. However, he didn't recall ever meeting Byakuya. They should have no enmity. At this point, Byakuya stepped forward and said, "Nice to meet you. I'm Byakuya from the Akatsuki organization. I'm here to invite you to join us as a member." "Join you?" Sasori sneered and asked, "Why should I become your subordinate?" Sasori's response left Byakuya momentarily stunned. It seemed he really had no compelling reasons to persuade Sasori. What had led Sasori to join Akatsuki in the original story? Was it because Akatsuki could fulfill Sasori's ambitions? Or was there another reason? After pondering for a moment, Byakuya finally recalled that Sasori had joined Akatsuki simply because Conan had convinced him, and he had started working on the Tailed Beast collection plan. However, there might be deeper reasons. Before Byakuya could provide an answer, Sasori had already taken out a scroll, bitten his finger, and instantly summoned 10 puppets that hovered between them. Just 10 puppets? Byakuya expressed his disappointment. Controlling 10 puppets was the limit for a puppet master, but it wasn't Sasori's maximum ability. It seemed Sasori hadn't shown his true strength. Upon hearing this, Sasori's expression darkened slightly. He then commanded his puppets to attack Byakuya. These puppets, made of steel, were more agile than regular ninjas under the control of chakra threads. With a whoosh, as Byakuya dodged a slicing attack, he heard the sound of kunai being launched. These fine needles seemed harmless and could only injure an ninja's skin, but they were coated with various deadly toxins. A slight mistake could lead to poisoning and death. This was a common tactic of Sand Village's puppet masters, using toxins to compensate for insufficient killing power. However, in front of Byakuya, these puppets were still too slow. Even without using teleportation jutsu to dodge, he could suppress the puppets with his paper jutsu's built-in flight ability. Moreover, these metal puppets lacked agility and couldn't even resist basic fire-style and water-style attacks. After experiencing the high temperatures of fire-style and the cooling effects of water-style, the joints of these puppets began to deform and malfunction. Seeing this, Sasori's expression grew extremely serious. Byakuya's strength exceeded Sasori's expectations. The recent attacks were so devastating that any ordinary ninja would have been killed many times over. Byakuya not only reacted promptly but also took measures to exploit the puppet's weaknesses. On the other hand, Kakazu was equally astonished. Byakuya's method of dismantling the puppet seemed simple, but the environment here was very different from the water-rich land of rain. Being able to use water style in a dry setting indicated that Byakuya's chakra control was beyond that of many high-ranking ninjas. Kakazu, who had initially been interested in rescuing and profiting, was now intensely curious about Byakuya's true strength. Seeing that ordinary puppets couldn't deal with Byakuya, Sasori took out a second scroll. This scroll contained the powerful human puppets he had collected and created over the years. Fire style, Fireball Jutsu. Water style, Water Dragon Jutsu. Taking advantage of Byakuya's momentary pause, Sasori manipulated the human puppets to attack him. However, Byakuya dodged the attacks effortlessly. This time, Byakuya didn't use jutsu, he directly destroyed Sasori's puppets with sheer force. In the face of hundreds of explosive tags, the human puppets were like flowers in a torrential rain, having no chance to attack. The chakra threads were also overwhelmed by the explosions. When the explosions ended, Byakuya approached the nearby puppet, saying, "Sasori, stop hiding your strength and bring out the third Kazekage puppet. Otherwise, you have no chance of winning against me. Or you could surrender and join my ranks. I won't mistreat you." Upon hearing the mention of the third Kazekage puppet, a blood seemed to be fuming in Sasori's eyes. While he had never hidden the fact that he had assassinated the third Kazekage, he had never mentioned it to other ninjas. How did Byakuya know he had killed the third Kazekage? If word of this got out, it would bring him a lot of unnecessary trouble. Thinking of this, Sasori took out his final scroll, preparing to summon the third Kazekage puppet and eliminate Byakuya and Kakazu to forever conceal this secret. However, in the next moment, Byakuya vanished from his position and, using his levitation technique, appeared right in front of Sasori. Before Sasori could react, he was bound by a sealing technique, unable to move or channel chakra. He could only watch as a kunai pierced his body. With a thud, The kunai pierced through Sasori's body, blood flowing from the wound. Seeing this, Byakuya was slightly taken aback. Wasn't the Hirakoa puppet Sasori used to conceal his identity? Why was it bleeding? Had Sasori not undergone mechanical ascension yet and was still in his flesh and blood form? Pulling out the kunai and examining Sasori's wound, Byakuya sighed. It confirmed that Sasori was indeed still flesh and blood. No wonder Sasori's movements had slowed significantly during the bombardment with explosive tags. Byakuya had initially thought Sasori was feigning weakness, but it seemed he had actually been stunned by the explosions. Reluctantly, Byakuya decided to first take the scroll containing the Kazekage puppet and then use medical ninjutsu on Sasori. He couldn't let this valuable technical talent die. Chapter 140, Sasori's dream. After being pierced by the kunai, Sasori's eyes widened as memories from his past began to surface. As the grandson of Chio, the elder of Hidden Sand Village, he received excellent ninja education from a young age, and both of his parents were renowned jonin in the village. Had things gone as expected, he would have lived a happy life. However, during his first year of schooling, he received the tragic news that his parents had died on the battlefield. From that moment, he harbored a desire for revenge. But by the time he had the power to seek revenge, his enemy, Tsukumo Hatake, had died in a ridiculous manner. A high-ranking ninja in Hidden Leaf Village, Tsukumo had chosen to commit suicide after failing a mission. Unable to avenge his parents, Sasori was left with no choice but to seek revenge against the third Kazekage. After all, if the third Kazekage had not participated in the Second Shinobi World War, his parents would not have been on the battlefield and would not have died. After eliminating the third Kazekage, Sasori became a rogue ninja from Hidden Sand Village. Although he wasn't actively hunted, his life as a rogue ninja was not much different from that of other rogue ninjas. Life as a rogue was full of freedom but fraught with danger, and he no longer enjoyed the protection of the village. Despite this, Sasori had no regrets. Once a choice was made, one had to bear the consequences. With these thoughts, Sasori closed his eyes, ready to use his remaining chakra for a final counterattack. Even if he had to die, he would not let his enemy get his intact body. However, after a few seconds, Sasori found that death was not coming as he had imagined. To his surprise, Byakuya had not killed him. Instead, he was using medical ninjutsu to heal him, which left Sasori very confused. Was Byakuya not here for the bounty after all? Byakuya, noticing Sasori's thoughts, said with a hint of frustration, "You didn't think I came here to kill you, did you? Even Kakazu isn't interested in your bounty. Do you really think I'd kill for such a small reward?" Kakazu, on the side, rolled his eyes. What did Byakuya mean that even he wasn't interested in Sasori's bounty? Sasori's bounty wasn't particularly low, but the risk and reward didn't add up. Kakazu was too busy with other commissions in the black market to risk serious injury for Sasori. After hearing Byakuya's words, Sasori fell into silence. He had heard that Byakuya wanted to recruit him, but who recruits wandering ninjas in such a direct manner? In the meantime, Byakuya completed Sasori's treatment. Under the effect of the medical ninjutsu, Sasori's wounds had been sealed and blood flow stopped. While there were still some internal injuries, they were no longer life-threatening. After a moment's contemplation, Sasori looked at the scroll in Byakuya's hand and said calmly, "I accept your offer to join you, but I have one condition: return my belongings to me first." Byakuya glanced at Sasori as if to say, "Sasori, do you think I'm as foolish as you?" With a chuckle, Byakuya responded, "I can't return your scroll right now. Who knows what powerful puppets might be inside it? Once you truly commit to joining us, I'll make sure to return the Kazekage puppet to you." Upon hearing the mention of the Kazekage puppet, Sasori's expression shifted. Byakuya knew about the Kazekage puppet. His plan to escape with it had failed before it even began. But how did Byakuya know this information? Sasori had always conducted his assassination of the third Kazekage and the creation of the human puppets in secrecy, never revealing it to anyone. Sensing Sasori's thoughts, Byakuya said, "Sasori, are you wondering how I know all this? How I know you assassinated the third Kazekage and turned him into a puppet? Well, it's not really difficult to figure out. It only takes a bit of analysis. 3 generations of Kazekage are known as the strongest Kazekage. Even if that title is somewhat inflated, the third Kazekage is undeniably a genuine powerhouse. Such a strong individual would only die from either a large-scale ninja assault or an assassination by someone close to them. Among the numerous suspects, only you have both the motive and the capability to assassinate the third Kazekage. And as for why I know about your Kazekage puppet, as an excellent puppeteer, you wouldn't pass up such high-quality material. Of course, you'd turn him into a puppet." Sasori nodded slightly upon hearing this but soon noticed something off. While Byakuya's analysis might correctly identify him as the assassin of the third Kazekage, how did Byakuya come to know such detailed information? How did he know about Sasori's ability to create human puppets? Furthermore, Byakuya's strength and intelligence network seemed unusually powerful. Realizing this, Sasori's interest in Byakuya's identity grew. He looked intently at Byakuya and asked, "Given your knowledge, you must truly be interested in me. However, I'm curious as to why you want to recruit me into your organization? I see potential in you. And your identity." After a pause, Byakuya continued, "Although your strength, having killed the third Kazekage through ambush, does this not yet reach the level of a Kage, you still have significant potential for growth. I have high hopes for you. Once you reach the strength of a Kage, you can help us with our Tailed Beast plan." The Tailed Beast plan, what is that? Although Sasori disliked Byakuya, it was undeniable that Byakuya was much stronger than him. For such a powerful figure to require assistance with their plans piqued Sasori's curiosity. Byakuya looked at Sasori and explained. The Tailed Beast plan involves collecting the tailed beasts. Our Akatsuki organization aims to capture all 9 tailed beasts to create an unprecedented weapon and then use it to conquer the entire shinobi world. Conquer the world. Sasori thought he must have misheard. But from Byakuya's expression, it seemed he was serious, genuinely recruiting members and preparing for world domination. The problem was that this plan seemed too implausible, making it difficult for Sasori to agree. With this in mind, Sasori frowned and said, "So, you're inviting me to join Akatsuki just to conquer the world? If that's the case, I have no interest in your plan and won't be of any help." Having said that, Sasori began to walk deeper into the forest, seemingly ready to leave without reclaiming the Kazekage puppet. Byakuya was not worried that Sasori would simply walk away. He said calmly, "My plan may be crazy, but what if I can help you become stronger and achieve your dreams?" Hearing this, Sasori, who had taken a few steps, stopped. He slowly turned around, facing Byakuya, and said with deliberate emphasis, "You know my dream? I don't even know what my dream is, so how come do you know?" Chapter 141, Byakuya begins to paint a grand picture. Sasori didn't know what his dream was, and Byakuya wasn't entirely sure either. However, Byakuya did know Sasori's background and the choice he ultimately made in the original timeline. Knowing that much was already enough. Taking a deep breath, Byakuya looked into Sasori's eyes and slowly said, "Sasori, your dream is to pursue eternal art and to achieve it through puppetry. In Akatsuki, as long as you follow the rules, you can freely pursue your art. I can guarantee that no one will interfere with your research." Hearing this, Sasori's heart began to sound alarm bells. Byakuya knowing his innermost thoughts was undoubtedly a terrifying thing. Seeing the shock on Sasori's face, Byakuya knew he was on the right track. Just a little. However, you're chasing eternal art because your parents died in the Ninja World War. After losing them, you threw yourself entirely into puppetry, which is how you attained your current power. Upon hearing this, Sasori was utterly stunned. If possible, he would have dealt with Byakuya right there, or fled far away. But he simply couldn't defeat Byakuya, so he could only brace himself and continue listening. Losing your parents at a young age is a tragedy. But what if I told you I could let you see your lost parents again? When Byakuya mentioned that he could let Sasori see his parents, Sasori could no longer stay silent and asked, "My parents have long been dead. What method do you have to let me see them?" Byakuya responded calmly, "The living and the dead naturally can't meet. But what if there's a secret technique that can temporarily revive the dead?" Sasori frowned. "What secret technique?" Byakuya spoke unhurriedly, "This technique isn't in my hands right now, but it does exist. It's in the Hidden Leaf village." Upon hearing this, Sasori's enthusiasm dimmed as soon as lit began to shine. He had thought Byakuya had already mastered a resurrection technique, but it seemed Byakuya was merely painting a grand picture, and the chances of realization were slim. However, in his current situation, it seemed he had no other options. After thinking for a moment, Sasori sighed and said, "Byakuya, remember your promise. I can join the Akatsuki, but within a few years, you must fulfill your promise." Byakuya nodded, "Naturally. In any case, Hidden Leaf Village will certainly be in chaos within a year. During the confusion, I will go to there and acquire the reanimation jutsu. However, using the reanimation jutsu comes with conditions. You need cells from the deceased beforehand." With a few words, Byakuya and Sasori reached an agreement. Byakuya would use the reanimation jutsu to resurrect Sasori's parents and provide funding for Sasori's experiments, in exchange for Sasori's loyalty to the Akatsuki. However, Kakazu, who had been standing nearby observing, noticed something off. How did Byakuya know that Hidden Leaf Village would fall into chaos within a year? Was the organization planning to move against the leaf that soon? That seemed a bit fast. And what exactly was the reanimation jutsu? Did Hidden Leaf Village truly have such a technique? Could it be a lie? Byakuya noticed the confusion on Kakazu's face but didn't say anything more. He had no obligation to explain things to Kakazu, and whatever Kakazu imagined was irrelevant to him. Just then, as Seisaori agreed to join the Akatsuki, a familiar system notification rang in Byakuya's ear. Seisaori of the Red Sand has joined the Akatsuki. You have obtained Puppet Modification Technique and Chakra, Large, Puppet Modification Technique. As puppet technology advances, the materials used to create puppets are no longer limited to wood and steel but can include ninjas themselves. Chakra, Large, a chakra reserve equivalent to that of a jonin. Byakuya glanced at the description of the puppet modification technique and immediately claimed the reward. This so-called puppet modification technique was essentially the technology for creating human puppets and modifying human bodies. These were techniques Seisaori would have mastered in the future, but Byakuya had obtained them in advance. The technique of creating human puppets allows the retention of a ninja's abilities from when they were alive, making it a fairly powerful secret art. Paired with the reanimation jutsu, it enables the soul and body to fight separately. The third Kazekage was the perfect example. Byakuya vividly remembered the scene where the puppet of the Kazekage fought against the reanimated Kazekage. The scene was undeniably humorous, so much so that the reanimated third Kazekage was so enraged that he broke free from the reanimation jutsu, never to be summoned again. However, compared to the technique of creating human puppets, the real essence of puppetry lies in the technology of transforming the human body into a puppet. This technology is, in fact, on par with the reanimation jutsu. As long as the puppet body is replaced periodically, one can essentially achieve immortality in a roundabout way. Byakuya still remembered that, in the future, Seisaori would turn himself into a puppet, with his soul and chakra stored entirely in a chakra core. If not for a brief moment of carelessness, Seisaori would never have died at the hands of Cho. Although Byakuya didn't currently have a need for immortality, having an additional life-saving technique would never be a bad thing. As for the large chakra reward, which was essentially a boost to his base abilities, it was always good to have more. In the later stages of battles in the ninja world, power was all about brute force. Byakuya was still aiming to become a chakra-tun. After recruiting Seisaori of the Red Sand, Byakuya didn't linger in the Land of Stone. He took Seisaori and Kakazu and headed to the Land of Rain that same night. Along the way, Byakuya explained the principles of the Akatsuki and gave Seisaori the jewel ring. Seisaori accepted the ring, but after hearing about its purpose, he suspected it was a tool for Byakuya to monitor him. Nevertheless, he still placed it on his thumb. After listening to Byakuya's explanation, Seisaori fell into deep thought. According to Byakuya, the Akatsuki was an organization dedicated to achieving love and peace. It had not only a number of elite ninjas under its banner but also Hidden Rain Village, the sixth largest ninja village, as one of its affiliates. However, the plan to create a weapon using the tailed beasts seemed a bit out of that ideology. To collect the 9 tailed beasts, the Akatsuki would inevitably come into conflict with the 5 great ninja villages. While Seisaori knew that Byakuya was strong, he wasn't yet qualified to take on all 5 major villages. Those were powerful organizations with tens of thousands of ninjas and hundreds of jonin. Perhaps that's why Byakuya was recruiting rogue ninjas like him. In a casual conversation with Kakazu, Seisaori learned that Kakazu had also been forced to join the Akatsuki, which made his expression turn odd. He started considering an escape plan. Could he possibly team up with Kakazu and escape when Byakuya wasn't paying attention? After some serious thought, Seisaori abandoned the idea of fleeing. He didn't trust Kakazu, just as he didn't trust Byakuya. Besides, the third Kazekage puppet was extremely important to him. There was also another crucial reason. Seisaori didn't want to continue wandering anymore. It had been 5 years since Seisaori assassinated the third Kazekage. In those 5 years, he had traveled to many countries, witnessing the local customs and cultures, but none of those places felt like home. He was pursuing eternal art, but the main theme of the ninja world was war and death. Although he could preserve the abilities and appearances of the dead by creating human puppets, achieving a semblance of eternity, it was always an illusion, a fantasy. It was not true immortality. If staying in the Akatsuki would allow him to peacefully study puppetry, he wouldn't mind remaining there. As for Byakuya's promises, Seisaori didn't take them to heart. How could a technique that could resurrect the dead exist in the ninja world? That was even more unrealistic than the pursuit of eternal art. Instead, he was more intrigued by something else Byakuya had mentioned earlier. The prediction that Hidden Leaf Village would soon fall into chaos piqued his curiosity. He wanted to know if Byakuya truly had the insight to guide him. If Hidden Leaf Village really would descend into chaos, it would be a good thing for him. At the very least, it would bring him some emotional satisfaction. After all, The ninjas who killed his parents were from Hidden Leaf Village. And if it would happen, he could simply leave the Akatsuki early. Chapter 142, Overwhelmed by technology. By the time they arrived in the Land of Rain, it was already midday the following day. Looking at the distant land shrouded in dark clouds and sensing the moisture permeating the air, Sasori furrowed his brow. As a puppeteer, he hated the gloomy sky and the damp, dark environment. The excessive humidity would rust metal and cause dried corpses to grow mold. It was predictable that during his time with the Akatsuki, maintaining his puppets would become more difficult than before. After silently complaining to himself, Sasori followed by Akiya's footsteps. Walking on the roads of the Land of Rain, Sasori noticed something different compared to other small countries. The roads here were built with concrete rather than just simple dirt. Moreover, the construction of these roads wasn't done by ordinary people. Along with proper architects and engineers, shinobis were also involved. In his understanding, ninjas shouldn't be involved in such construction work. It was an unspoken agreement between ninja villages and the daimyos to not interfere in each other's domains. However, in the Land of Rain, Hidden Rain Village had quietly broken this tacit rule. This made Sasori realize that Akatsuki behind by Akiya might indeed be different from other ninja groups. But what did that matter to him? He never had any idealistic visions of achieving peace. To him, only eternal art was worth pursuing at all costs. Not long after, the group arrived at the gates of the Akatsuki base. Gazing at the eerie-looking base, Sasori's expression changed slightly. He then asked in confusion, "Byakuya, is this really our base? Why does it feel so creepy?" Byakuya glanced at Sasori and gave him a peculiar look, saying, "When we carry out the plan for the tailed beast weapons, we will be standing in opposition to the entire ninja world. As the villains in their eyes, shouldn't our hideout feel as eerie as this?" Hearing this, Sasori didn't know what to say, his face filled with helplessness. "So, you know that capturing the tailed beasts will provoke the 5 great ninja villages, but who in the world boasts about being villains? Shouldn't you proclaim yourselves as the righteous ones?" Sensing Sasori's thoughts, Byakuya chuckled, "Relax, Mr. Puppet Master, I was just joking earlier. The Akatsuki's plans regarding the tailed beast weapons are still confidential for now, so we chose this inconspicuous place." Hearing this, Sasori didn't dwell on it further. In fact, he was more concerned about the future working environment, benefits, and whether the research funding would be sufficient. Everything else was just trivial details. Of course, there was also the matter of the third Kazekage puppet. "Byakuya, now that I've joined the Akatsuki, according to our agreement, shouldn't you return the third Kazekage puppet to me?" After saying this, Sasori looked at Byakuya, unsure if Byakuya would actually return the Kazekage puppet. The Kazekage puppet was not an ordinary puppet. Although its power wasn't quite as strong as the third Kazekage was when alive, it had inherited the magnet-style bloodline limit, making it one of Sasori's most prized creations and contributing to about 30% of his overall strength. Byakuya nodded and immediately returned the scroll containing the third Kazekage puppet to Sasori. Byakuya's willingness to so easily return the puppet was something Sasori hadn't anticipated. He thought Byakuya might keep the puppet as leverage to control him. Thinking this, Sasori asked, puzzled, "Byakuya, aren't you worried that I'll escape once I have the puppet? With the Kazekage puppet in hand, my combat power would double." Byakuya glanced at Sasori and said expressionlessly, "I promised to return the puppet, and I won't break my word. Besides, we are in Hidden Rain Village. Even with the puppet, you wouldn't be able to cause much trouble. However, if you try to escape, someone will show you just how deep the waters of the ninja world really are." Hearing this, Sasori remained expressionless, though deep down, he was unimpressed. He wasn't sure how deep the waters of the ninja world truly were, but he knew he was incredibly strong. In the entire ninja world, aside from Byakuya, only the leaders of the 5 great ninja villages could overpower him. If Amigaku really had so many powerful ninjas, it would have already become one of the 5 great ninja villages. In the following days, Byakuya first arranged Sasori's accommodations and then allocated a significant amount of research funding for Sasori to continue his puppet art studies. In return, Sasori was required to submit regular research findings on his puppet techniques. Sasori readily agreed to Byakuya's terms. Who would turn down free research funding? However, upon unsealing the scroll and seeing his own Kazekage puppet, the thought of taking Byakuya's place crossed Sasori's mind. If he could defeat Byakuya and seize control of the Akatsuki, not only would he gain access to all of the organization's resources, but he could also have his own ninja village. From there, whether it was in pursuit of eternal art or launching a war against Hidden Leaf Village, it would all become much easier. Soon, a week passed. With each passing day, the desire to defeat Byakuya grew stronger in Sasori's mind. He even considered confronting Byakuya directly and launching a full-scale attack. However, just as he was thinking this, Sasori received an invitation from Byakuya to attend a sparring session between the Akatsuki's higher-ups. When Sasori saw Byakuya and Conan sparring, unleashing thousands of explosive tags, he began to doubt his own strength. Could he really survive amidst that overwhelming sea of explosions? Even though he had transformed his body into a puppet through his own puppet technique, it was uncertain if he could stand up to those two. An author really is high. Seriously though, even I am confused whether Sasori has puppet body or not. After all, no matter how sturdy a puppet was, it couldn't withstand such relentless bombardment. The sparring session between Byakuya and Nagato, however, completely shattered Sasori's worldview and made him question his own mastery of puppetry. During their match, both Byakuya and Nagato used puppets to fight. Seeing this, Sasori became intrigued, eager to witness Byakuya's skill in puppetry. As the match progressed, Sasori was astonished to find that Byakuya was an outstanding puppeteer, able to control 3 puppets simultaneously. Although 3 puppets weren't as many as he and his grandmother could control, it was undoubtedly at a Jonin level of skill. Nagato, on the other hand, controlled a puppet with 2 extraordinary abilities, repulsion and attraction. In the face of such powers, even the Kazekage puppet's magnet style seemed insignificant. Soon, Sasori noticed something strange and widened his eyes. Neither Byakuya nor Nagato used chakra threads to control their puppets. Instead, they used pitch-black rods to achieve long-distance control of the puppets. For Sasori, this was a groundbreaking innovation, a realization that puppeteers didn't necessarily need chakra threads to control their puppets and could manipulate them remotely instead. Sasori could accept that his strength wasn't equal to others, but he couldn't tolerate being crushed when it came to puppet techniques. Chapter 143, Sasori's Observations in the Akatsuki. Sasori didn't consider himself a genius puppeteer, but life had taught him otherwise. From a young age, he had never lost to anyone in puppet techniques. By the time he was still young, he had already surpassed the jonin of his village who were skilled in puppetry, and he was hailed as the ninja most likely to surpass Munzman Chikamatsu, the founding father of puppetry. Sasori believed in this deeply. He was convinced that one day, he would surpass Munzman and become the greatest puppeteer. However, just when he was pushing the limits by increasing the number of chakra threads, going from controlling 10 puppets to 20, and even going so far as to modify his own body, the battle between Nagato and Byakuya revealed to him that puppets didn't necessarily require chakra threads to be controlled. Instead, they could use these strange black rods to transmit chakra and remotely control the puppets. At this moment, Byakuya noticed the look on Sasori's face and smiled faintly. He had been aware of Sasori's secretive actions over the past few days but hadn't stopped him. His goal was to shatter Sasori's confidence in puppetry and make him realize the benefits of staying in the Akatsuki, thus willingly choosing to remain in the organization. That was why Byakuya had specifically organized this sparring session among the Akatsuki's higher-ups. And now, it seemed that the performance was highly effective. Sasori would most likely abandon any thoughts of leaving and willingly stay in the Akatsuki, working for him. At that moment, after thinking for a while, Sasori also began to notice the drawbacks of the black rods in controlling puppets. While Byakuya and Nagato could control puppets from a distance, their precision wasn't as good as his. Moreover, this kind of remote control required not only those mysterious black rods but also an enormous amount of chakra. Although Sasori had a considerable amount of chakra, it was nowhere near the monstrous level of these two. In actual combat, the traditional chakra threads would still be more practical for him. However, this didn't stop him from learning this puppet control technique to strengthen his own power. With this in mind, Sasori walked toward Byakuya and Nagato. The two, who had fought to a draw, stopped their sparring and looked at Sasori as he approached. After a moment of contemplation, Sasori slowly asked, "Byakuya, what are these black rods called?" "Black rods," Byakuya replied bluntly. Noticing Sasori's perplexed expression, he smiled and explained, "To be precise, they are tools for receiving and transmitting chakra. They are creations of yin-yang style, and only Nagato can make them." Yin-yang style? Sasori gasped. He knew what yin-yang style meant. Yin-yang style wasn't just a combination of yin style and yang style, it involved incredibly complex chakra transformations. Legend had it that only the Sage of Six Paths had mastered the power of yin-yang style. At that moment, Sasori suddenly noticed Nagato's eyes. Those ripple-like eyes reminded him of the legends about the Sage of Six Paths in the ninja world. It was said that the sage possessed these very eyes, known as the Rinnegan, the most powerful of all bloodline limit dojutsu. With the Akatsuki possessing such eyes, it was no wonder they were so brave enough to form a plan to capture the tailed beasts. Nagato was likely the true mastermind behind the Akatsuki, secretly aiming to control the entire ninja world, while Byakuya was merely one of many subordinates. But in the next moment, Sasori's fantasy about Nagato was shattered. Seeing Sasori fall silent, Byakuya turned to Nagato and said, "Nagato, this is a new recruit of mine, a skilled puppeteer. How about you make him a few black rods to play with?" Nagato glanced at Sasori, then nodded and created a black rod with a wave of his hand. Byakuya took the black rod, handed it to Sasori, and waved his hand casually. "Sasori, time to wake up. This is a small gift from Nagato. You didn't zone out on me, did you?" Coming back to his senses, Sasori carefully took the black rod. Feeling the cold texture of the rod, Sasori sighed inwardly. He had thought Nagato was the mastermind, but it turned out that Byakuya was the one really in charge. How did he end up being recruited by someone like this? Still, the black rod was indeed a nice gift, at least giving him something to study in terms of chakra transmission. If he could fully understand its principles, even without mastering yin-yang style, he could potentially find similar materials to develop his own long-distance puppet control techniques. With that in mind, Sasori headed toward the laboratory. After Sasori left, Nagato watched him go and asked, "Byakuya, is this the new ninja you recruited? How strong is he?" "Very strong." Conan walked over and added, "Sasori of the Red Sand has quite a reputation in black markets across various nations. He is even known to have killed Jonin from the 5 great shinobi villages, though no one knows his true identity. I actually considered recruiting him for our village before, but it seems you beat me to it. If I had known you were interested, Conan, I wouldn't have recruited him." Byakuya said with a slight pause before continuing, "But Sasori of the Red Sand is no ordinary ninja. He's the one who assassinated the 3rd Kazekage and turned him into a human puppet." Hearing this, both Conan and Nagato were visibly surprised. The fact that Sasori had assassinated the 3rd Kazekage in his teenage years was astounding. He was indeed a rare talent. However, their surprise lasted only for a moment before they regained their composure. For the average person, such a feat, challenging someone of Kage level at such a young age, would seem impossible and thrilling just to hear about. But considering their own pasts, they were no strangers to defying authority at a young age. Byakuya noticed their brief reaction and smiled. "It's thanks to your help that Sasori didn't try to escape. I wouldn't have been able to handle him on my own if there wasn't any help from you two." Conan and Nagato exchanged smiles, but their gazes betrayed their true thoughts. "Byakuya, we're all familiar with each other. Everyone knows that you're the most enigmatic one in the organization. Aside from you, who else could keep up with someone like Nagato, who wields the Rinnegan?" Meanwhile, Sasori was deep in thought. Now holding the black rod sample, he once again considered whether he should take this opportunity to flee. He worried that if he got too deeply involved with the Akatsuki, he would lose the chance to leave and might become trapped. However, escaping would earn him the Akatsuki's enmity. He would be hunted, unable to move freely in the ninja world. As Sasori was caught in this dilemma, something within the Akatsuki base caught his attention. An old man, seemingly responsible for training new recruits, piqued Sasori's interest. Despite being hailed as a genius puppeteer, Sasori found this old man hard to read. After carefully observing and sensing the old man's strength, Sasori was taken aback. The old man's power was undeniable, and any thoughts of leaving the Akatsuki evaporated from Sasori's mind. What kind of terrifying organization was the Akatsuki, if even an elderly man wandering around the base possessed such strength? Chapter 144, Minato Namikage's hardline stance in Hidden Leaf Village. After attending a grueling 2-hour high-level meeting, Minato Namikaze dragged his weary body back to the Hokage's office. Instead of attending to the usual village affairs, Minato stood by the window, gazing at the peaceful and serene village outside, deep in thought. During the meeting, Minato had faced subtle yet pointed opposition from several members of the village's leadership. Though the advisory elders who served under the Hokage didn't overtly oppose him, they had begun to push back against the reform policies he had been trying to implement over the past few months. Leading this opposition was Denzo's faction, which believed Minato was being too lenient with the Uchiha clan. They argued that the decision to place the Uchiha in charge of the village's police force was a decree set by the second Hokage. Despite Minato's newfound status as Hokage, they felt it wasn't his place to go against a decision made by one of their predecessors. The faction supporting the third Hokage, on the other hand, preferred to maintain the village's status quo. They believed that change was unnecessary and risky, fearing that any drastic reforms could lead to irreversible consequences. Minato could still ignore these dissenting voices and push forward with his reform agenda, dismissing the elders' resistance as the rigid thinking of those who had held power for too long. However, what troubled him more deeply was that opposition wasn't just coming from the elders, it was also coming from his friends, subordinates, and even his recent ally, Fugaku Uchiha. This made Minato start to question the righteousness of his reforms. After all, while his close friends like Shikaku and Choza had remained silent, likely due to the pressure from their clans, the opposition from the civilian ninjas and even some within the Uchiha clan baffled him. The reforms clearly benefited their future development, yet rather than supporting him, they had resisted, dragging their feet on policy implementation, delaying the execution of his plans, and ultimately leading to greater harm than good. Minato sighed deeply, recalling his conversation with Yahiko months earlier. At that time, Minato had heard of Yahiko's struggles with reform in his own village, and while sympathetic, he had felt a bit superior, believing that with the support of the third Hokage, his own reforms would go smoothly. But now he realized that the greatest obstacles to change weren't external enemies, they were the very people who had supported him, the third Hokage himself, and even his closest comrades. As an elder, the third Hokage was untouchable, and Minato's old friends, who had fought beside him, could not be pressured. Strangely enough, the only faction that hadn't obstructed his reforms was Denzo's root organization, where reforms were progressing relatively smoothly. Yahiko had once told him that facing opposition during reforms was inevitable. While dealing with the challenges directly was important, sometimes the real solution lay in eliminating political adversaries rather than the problems themselves. Minato had been surprised by Yahiko's pragmatic approach, wondering where Yahiko had learned such methods, but he couldn't deny there was some truth in what he said. After all, this was how things had functioned under the third Hokage. The Hokage presented a flawless, ideal image to the village, while the dark, dirty work was left to Denzo, creating a balanced yet opposing relationship between the two. But Minato didn't like such tactics. The Hokage's responsibility was to protect everyone in the village, not to target or manipulate them, especially not by delegating the village's dark dealings to someone else. The most important issue was that Minato didn't have anyone who could act as his cleaner or scapegoat. Denzo, who led Root, could serve this role, but since he had already been used by the third Hokage, Minato couldn't fully trust him. He knew that Denzo needed to be kept in check. Of all the ninjas Minato knew, the only one capable of handling such dark responsibilities was his own student, Kakashi Hatake. However, Kakashi had already spent too much time immersed in the shadows. Minato didn't want him to be tainted by Hidden Leaf Village's darkness any further. After much deliberation, Minato realized that there was no suitable candidate for this role. In the end, he was left with only one option, to take on the role of the villain himself and adopt a firm, uncompromising stance, even if it meant alienating those around him. The Hokage is the Hokage, there is no need to divide it into light and dark. Minato Namikaze firmly believed that his reforms were for the benefit of the village, and with that conviction, he had no reason to fear any opposition. With renewed determination, Minato turned his gaze back to his desk and began issuing a series of Hokage directives. Several hours later, the elite ninjas of Hidden Leaf Village received the Hokage's orders. In these orders, Minato demanded, with unwavering resolve, that the major clans and departmental heads enforce the reforms issued 2 months prior. Regardless of their personal opposition, they were required to implement these reforms. Minato made it clear that unless he stepped down from the position of Hokage, he would not abandon his reforms for as long as he held the office. Faced with Minato's firm stance, the high-ranking ninjas had no choice but to proceed with the reforms, despite their reluctance. They had initially planned to drag out the process, hoping that Minato would eventually give up. However, Minato was prepared for a protracted struggle. Though they were resistant to the changes, they were also wary of antagonizing the young and determined fourth Hokage. Moreover, if they refused to implement the reforms, their deputies were waiting in the wings, ready to take over their positions. As for the idea of impeaching the fourth Hokage, they had considered it but found no other suitable candidate for the role. No one else was as fitting for the position as Minato Namikaze after all. Becoming Hokage required the support of most of the high-ranking ninjas, but ultimately, it was the strength that mattered most. At the time of the third Hokage's resignation, Minato was the strongest ninja in the village. His title of Hidden Leaf Village's Yellow Flash and his battlefield achievements in the Hidden Stones Village War were the best proof of his prowess. Additionally, the high-ranking ninjas knew that Kushina Uzumaki, the host of the Nine Tails, was Minato's wife. This connection further solidified Minato's position. Upon receiving the Hokage's orders, the current Inoshikacho trio was momentarily taken aback but quickly commanded their clan members to strictly adhere to the fourth Hokage's directives. They had been observing from the sidelines, but Minato's resolute attitude forced them to make a decision. They recognized the benefits of the reforms but had been concerned that Minato might be influenced by the advisory elders. Even though Minato was the fourth Hokage, The retired third Hokage still wielded considerable power in the village. Minato's efforts to reform the departments were not only for the village's benefit but also to consolidate his own power. Shikakunara, Choza Akimaki, and other influential figures had a good personal rapport with Minato but had not chosen sides as long as the situation remained uncertain. They would only align themselves with Minato if he demonstrated a decisive advantage. In their view, the struggle between the fourth Hokage and the third Hokage would ultimately end with Minato emerging victorious, as youth and determination were his greatest assets. Chapter 145, Denzo and Orochimaru's reactions. In contrast to the resolute stance of the Inoshikacho trio, the attitudes of the other clans remained ambiguous. Smaller clans like the Yamanaka and Inuzuka were caught between a rock and a hard place. They were reluctant to offend the fourth Hokage, but they also didn't want to antagonize the advisory elders who were subtly opposing him. These high-ranking figures, engaged in behind-the-scenes maneuvering, had the power to easily crush them. Unlike the Inoshikacho trio, who had been united for over a century and had their interests closely intertwined, these smaller clans were fragmented and lacked the trust needed to form a cohesive group. Among the many clans in Hidden Leaf Village, only the Hyuga and Uchiha families were able to maintain their independence. Due to the branch family system within the Hyuga clan, their ninjas rarely held high positions in the major departments. However, their Byakugan was indispensable to the village's operations. As a result, the fourth Hokage's reforms did not directly affect them, unless the reforms touched upon their specific clan system. After discussions among the Hyuga clan leader and the main house members, the Hyuga decided to remain neutral, avoiding offending either side. They believed that neutrality would make them a sought-after ally by both factions. On the other hand, the Uchiha clan was in an uproar after receiving the Hokage's orders. While Fugaku Uchiha had hinted at a possible collaboration with the fourth Hokage during the clan meeting, many Uchiha ninjas strongly opposed giving up any part of their positions in the police force. The police force had provided many less talented ninjas with a decent living and a sense of superiority over ordinary ninjas. The fourth Hokage's reforms clearly threatened their interests. As for the conflict between the fourth and third Hokages, some had analyzed the situation but were more focused on their own interests rather than the larger political struggle. In their view, whether the fourth or the third Hokage won, the Hokage's faction would prevail. The Uchiha had no chance of becoming Hokage themselves, so they needed to seize the opportunity to strike hard and attract other clans during this period of conflict. Facing the complex clan meeting, Fugaku felt equally conflicted. While the village's power struggle between the fourth and third Hokages was intense, the Uchiha clan also faced internal discord. Many within the clan seemed eager to replace him as the head of the police force. If possible, he wanted to carry out internal reforms within the Uchiha clan, to clean up the complex factions and deal with the militant elements who were quick to call for violence. These ninjas talked big but lacked dedication to their training. Since the departure of Madara Uchiha, there had been no other clan leaders with significant strength. Furthermore, the number of ninjas who had awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan was very limited. In contrast, within the Hokage faction, there were only a handful of ninjas with clan leader, Kage, level strength. Given this situation, rather than aiming for the Uchiha to surpass the Senju, it might be better to follow the example of the predecessors and join the Hokage faction, becoming a part of it, and then bide time to potentially become Hokage. Of course, he couldn't rely on the current members of the clan. His only hope lay in his proud son Itachi Uchiha and the recently born Sasuke. Itachi was a genius who could master techniques like the fireball jutsu with just a glance. His future was bright. With such a talented older brother, Sasuke's own potential wouldn't be lacking. Perhaps one day, with the help of Mikoto, Sasuke could become good friends with Minato's children. Leveraging these connections might make it easier to become a Hokage advisor in the future. Eventually, either Itachi or Sasuke would likely become Hokage, or at the very least, the Uchiha clan would regain its former glory. For now, Fugaku only needed to suppress dissent within the clan and minimize trouble for the fourth Hokage. Fugaku Uchiha was very clear about what he needed to do. He could not afford to let his dream of becoming Hokage slip away just because he failed to succeed the fourth Hokage. There would still be opportunities for the Uchiha clan. As Fugaku Uchiha entered his contemplation, Denzo and Orochimaru also received the Hokage's orders. Denzo frowned upon reading Minato's assertive directives in the Hokage's orders and sneered. Minato no Mikage is indeed young. Such a hardline stance is bound to provoke Hiru's and Saratobi's dissatisfaction, and he might even offend Koharu Utatane and Hamura Mitakato, those two useless ones. Without their support, does he really think he can push through his reforms? The village's issues could not be easily solved. Does he think he's Tobirama-sensei? Orochimaru, having read the contents, chuckled. I actually think Minato's strong stance is quite effective. While the village may appear calm on the surface, the gears of progress have already stopped turning. To change a stagnant situation, radical reforms are necessary. If I were Hokage, my reforms would be even more radical. At the very least, I would offer the ninjas in the village a chance to change their fate. Hearing this, Denzo's expression darkened significantly. He was well aware of the village's predicament and recognized that Minato's reforms had some merit. However, Minato was targeting their department for restructuring, and the budget cuts would affect them as well. As for Orochimaru's radical reform suggestions, Denzo remained outwardly expressionless but internally opposed. What chance to change one's fate? It's just a way to recruit volunteers. If extensive recruitment of test subjects were to occur, even if Orochimaru became Hokage, he would be driven out of office. Though Denzo had long resided in the shadows, he knew that some things were meant to stay hidden. Even if given a chance to step into the spotlight, he would keep those things concealed. But Orochimaru was clearly different. He didn't seem to shy away from these practices at all. Whether it was privately recruiting test subjects or conducting secret human experiments, Orochimaru was almost brazen about it. If not for the preemptive measures Denzo had taken, Orochimaru would have faced an even more crushing defeat in the Hokage election. Denzo suddenly felt a pang of envy towards Orochimaru. Compared to himself, Orochimaru was undoubtedly more fortunate. Both Jiraiya and Tsunade, who were also disciples of Sarutobi Hiruzen, had withdrawn from the Hokage race, leaving only the younger Minato Namikaze. If Denzo were in Orochimaru's shoes, he might have chosen to mask his true intentions in front of Hiruzen. Once he became Hokage, he could proceed with his own agenda without delay. However, what Denzo didn't know was that Orochimaru's ambitions extended beyond Hidden Leaf Village. The constraints of the village's sky were starting to limit his vision. After his failure to become Hokage, Orochimaru began contemplating leaving Hidden Leaf Village. Only by departing from the village could he freely research ninjutsu and explore the secrets of chakra. The reason he had yet to decide where to go was that he had not yet settled on a specific destination. Chapter 146, Good People Are Easily Exploited. Denzo stared at Orochimaru for a long time before sighing softly. No matter how advantageous Orochimaru's initial position had been, now, like Denzo, he was also a failed candidate for the Hokage role. With this thought, Denzo said to Orochimaru, "Orochimaru, there's no need to bring up your ideas again. Let me ask you, do you want to join me in impeaching the fourth Hokage? If we can unite with the other advisors and elders, we might be able to force Minato out." Upon hearing this, Orochimaru glanced at Denzo and glared at him. "Denzo, you can go ahead and impeach Minato on your own, but don't foolishly drag me into this. Right now, Minato has crossed the line and affected the old man's interests. That's between them. I have no intention of stepping out and drawing fire for them." Hearing this, Denzo's face darkened, but he had to admit that Orochimaru was more considerate in his approach. Hiruzen had chosen Minato only because he didn't want to relinquish the power of the Hokage to anyone else. He had expected Minato, with his shallow roots, to be easily controlled. However, things hadn't gone as planned, and Minato quickly developed his own independent views. In this clash between the new and old Hokages, those like them who had failed to win did not need to get involved. Failure, however, wasn't the truly frightening part. What was truly terrifying was losing the will to fight for the Hokage position. Orochimaru might immerse himself in his experiments and forget about the Hokage title, but Denzo couldn't do that. He had already waited decades to ascend to the position of Hokage. Even if there seemed to be no immediate opportunity to become Hokage, he would continue to work towards it. However, his most urgent task now was to cultivate a new group of subordinates. Without enough followers, he wouldn't have the strength to confront the third and fourth Hokages, let alone plan for the next Hokage election. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, several days had gone by. Unlike the chaos and opportunism of the past 2 months, Minato's recent reforms had progressed exceptionally smoothly over these past few days. And all of this was because Minato had started taking things seriously. Even though Minato was very young and not highly experienced, he was still the fourth Hokage of Hidden Leaf Village. When Minato displayed a mild and lenient attitude, the village's advisors, elders, and the various ninja clans would try to block reforms that affected their interests. But once Minato was truly determined to take action, no one could stop him. At least in the days following the issuance of Minato's Hokage orders, the voices of opposition in the village suddenly disappeared, replaced by widespread approval of the fourth Hokage's policies. Faced with this situation, Minato felt somewhat conflicted in his office. He hadn't expected the Hokage to have so much power. He could, with just his own strength, suppress all opposition in the village. But after some careful thought, Minato began to feel that the Hokage's power wasn't really that great. If he had compromised with the village elders and the ninja clans this time, it would have been incredibly difficult to push through any future initiatives. He would have become nothing more than a puppet in the Hokage's office, there only to stamp papers. What was most troubling to Minato, however, was how other people's attitudes had changed after he became Hokage. He felt that his former superiors, friends, and even subordinates had grown more distant, and when they met or spoke with him, their tone had become noticeably more formal and restrained. The only person Minato felt he could truly confide in now might just be Kushina. Perhaps this is the helpless reality of becoming Hokage. However, as long as he could make the village stronger, Minato was willing to endure the pain. Becoming Hokage had been his dream since childhood, and it was also Kushina's dream. While Minato in the Hokage office was lamenting how difficult it was to be Hokage, Kabuto Yakushi at the orphanage was busy completing the tasks assigned by Byakuya, hoping to earn more compensation to keep the orphanage running. After all, aside from the physically healthy children, the orphanage housed many children with congenital disabilities. Even when they reached the age to enroll in the ninja academy, it was difficult for them to pass the exams and become preparatory ninjas, which would lead to a more comfortable life. The task Byakuya assigned today was simple. Besides the daily intelligence gathering, Kabuto was to extract chakra, exercise his body, and engage in his favorite activity, reading. Kabuto loved reading, partly because it allowed him to experience the vibrant world described in books. On the other hand, the knowledge in books could help the orphanage escape its current predicament, allowing the children to grow up under the sun like normal kids. After finishing the book he was reading, Kabuto tried to extract chakra while asking Byakuya, "Senpai, do you think if I become a ninja, I can help everyone at the orphanage live a good life? I've heard that ninjas can control fire and water, so getting enough to eat should be easy. The head of the orphanage is struggling only because she's not a ninja." Byakuya was analyzing the intelligence Kabuto had gathered, thinking about sending it to the Akatsuki organization right away. Hearing Kabuto's naive and innocent comment, Byakuya couldn't help but laugh. "Kabuto, you live well in Hidden Leaf Village, the village of ninjas, but why do you have such illusions about them?" Kabuto didn't understand why Byakuya said this, but his words reflected his true thoughts. Seeming to notice what was going on in Kabuto's mind, Byakuya said meaningfully, "Kabuto, do you really think the head of the orphanage, Nanu, is just a powerless civilian? The head of the orphanage is a ninja." Kabuto couldn't fully comprehend this and muttered to himself, "If the head is a ninja, why doesn't she use ninjutsu in front of us? Why should she use ninjutsu in front of you? Besides, if you think she isn't a ninja, how do you think she managed to keep you all safe in Hidden Leaf Village?" Pausing for a moment, Byakuya continued, "Where do you think the children who leave the orphanage go? Why does none of them ever come back? Don't you think the orphanage seems more like a special training facility?" Digesting this unbelievable information, Kabuto stood there in shock. He then quietly asked Byakuya, "Senpai, are you trying to make me stay away from the head of the orphanage?" "I can't do that." "Of course not." Byakuya shook his head. "I'm just giving you a heads up. The orphanage isn't exactly a nice place, and your headmaster definitely isn't a good person." "You're saying the head isn't a good person? You're the one who's not a good person. You've bribed me to steal intelligence from Hidden Leaf Village and now you're slandering the head who built the orphanage." Kabuto began fuming steam from his ears. In his eyes, there was no one better than the head of the orphanage. She was like a mother to him, and he couldn't tolerate Byakuya's slander. Byakuya didn't mind Kabuto's reaction, nor did he care to argue with a child. He was only speaking about what had already happened in the story. The orphanage was indeed a front for the root organization, and Nano Yakushi's real identity was a spy under Denzo, codenamed the Walking Priestess. However, to gain Kabuto's trust, Byakuya added, "I never claimed to be a good person. But, little guy, you should hope your headmaster isn't a good person either. In this cruel ninja world, good people are easily taken advantage of." Chapter 147, The Walking Priestess. When you manage to extract chakra and learn the sensory ninjutsu I taught you, you'll realize whether what I said is true. The orphanage is far more complex than you think. After saying this, Byakuya's voice gradually faded until it disappeared into the corner of the room. Kabuto was no longer surprised by such scenes, but he was deeply intrigued by the sensory ninjutsu Byakuya left behind. While he firmly believed that the head of the orphanage was a truly good person, he couldn't help but wonder if she was a ninja and if the orphanage was indeed a training facility for some department in Hidden Leaf Village. Byakuya had made a good point. Where had all the children who had grown up in the orphanage gone? The children raised by the head couldn't all be ungrateful that they wouldn't even consider paying a visit, and the fact that none had returned to visit spoke volumes. Kabuto opened the scroll containing the sensory ninjutsu and began studying it. This was his first time learning ninjutsu, and just by looking at the words, He felt as though they had a magical pull, urging him to read on. After finishing the scroll, Kabuto formed the necessary hand signs to enhance his sensory abilities. Through the sensory ninjutsu, Kabuto sensed the chakra within himself. Chakra was the product of combining spiritual and physical energy, the foundation for using ninjutsu and enhancing one's body. After wandering around the orphanage for a day, Kabuto confirmed that, aside from himself, none of the other children had extracted chakra. From this, it seemed clear that the orphanage was not a training facility for a Hidden Leaf Village department. Just as Kabuto was beginning to feel relieved, he suddenly sensed something and turned to look toward the entrance of the orphanage. There, he saw Nano carrying a basket of vegetables toward the door. Walking beside her were two men, seemingly engaged in a conversation with her. Nano's expression gradually darkened as if she just wanted to chase the two men away. However, after the men said something, her face became grim before she reluctantly invited them into the orphanage. Seeing this, Kabuto was slightly stunned. Normally, he would have assumed these were just some vagrants harassing the Nano because of her beauty, but after learning sensory ninjutsu, Kabuto could now confirm that these two men were Hidden Leaf Village ninjas. Additionally, Nano herself possessed chakra, indicating that she, too, was a ninja. Judging by the chakra response, Nano was actually stronger than the two Hidden Leaf Village ninjas. Could it be that she has triggered some high-ranking officials in Hidden Leaf Village and is trying to break free? Kabuto thought. Byakuya wasn't lying after all. Nano was indeed a Hidden Leaf Village ninja, and there was a high probability that the orphanage was some kind of training institution for Hidden Leaf Village. However, Kabuto couldn't understand why Nano had kept these things hidden from them. Could it be that Nano was only using them? While Kabuto was grappling with this realization, Byakuya reappeared beside him. Glancing at Nano in the distance, Byakuya said, "Kabuto, I told you, I wasn't lying. Your headmaster is indeed a ninja of Hidden Leaf Village. But it's strange, you're also grown up now, and she still hasn't begun training you. I wonder what she's thinking. Could it be that she's grown soft and can't bear to train you?" Byakuya paused deliberately before continuing. "I really want to know more about Nano's situation, but unfortunately, I'm not yet a fully fledged ninja, so I can't follow and listen in." Hearing this, Kabuto narrowed his eyes. Byakuya had spoken exactly what was on his mind. At this point, Kabuto had no choice but to seek Byakuya's help, so in a humble tone, he asked, "Lord Byakuya, could you teach me the ninjutsu to conceal my presence?" "I could teach you, but you wouldn't be able to learn it just yet." Byakuya shook his head and continued, "But I can conceal your presence and take you closer to eavesdrop on their conversation. I also want to know what they're discussing, but you'll need to get a bit closer." Kabuto eagerly agreed to Byakuya's proposal. He knew Byakuya was a spy from another village hiding in Hidden Leaf Village, but Kabuto was more interested in discovering the true identity of the headmistress and whether she had been using them. This was crucial to him. Soon, Kabuto, with his presence concealed, arrived near Nano and the Hidden Leaf Village ninjas. Hidden in a corner, he used the sensory ninjutsu to listen in on their conversation with ease. Inside the orphanage, the Hidden Leaf Village ninja looked at Nano and said, "Walking Priestess, Lord Denzo has ordered you to return to the route immediately. You can't stay here any longer." Nano glanced at her former comrades, a glimmer flashing across her glasses. "Don't call me that name. I am no longer the Walking Priestess. I am now just the head of this orphanage, Nano. And besides, I've already repaid Lord Denzo for his kindness. I have no ties to Root anymore." The Root ninja maintained a stoic expression and replied, "Once a member of Root, always a member of Root. Even though the war is over, it doesn't mean you're free from Lord Denzo's control. You are still a member of Root, and you will continue to serve him." He then scanned the area before adding, "However, Lord Denzo acknowledges your contributions to the village, so he's giving you a choice this time. You can either return to Root and resume your role as the Walking Priestess to carry out missions, or you can provide a few children with potential ninja abilities to replenish Root's ranks. Root lost quite a few ninjas in this last war." Upon hearing these two options, Nano trembled with rage, barely containing her anger as she responded, "I will not choose either of these. I have left Root, and the children in this orphanage have nothing to do with your organization. If you continue to press me, I will go to the 4th Hokage. If the 4th Hokage will stay quiet too, then I will take the children and join Root. For now, leave, your presence is not welcome here, and I won't be seeing you out." The two Root ninjas exchanged glances. They knew they couldn't obtain permission from the 4th Hokage. In fact, this recruitment operation by Root was being carried out in secret, and if exposed, it might lead to consequences from the Hokage's office. But when had Root ever needed to explain its actions to anyone? With that in mind, the Root ninja gave Nano a cold look before saying menacingly, "This is our last meeting, Miss Head of Orphanage. Next time, Lord Denzo will be paying a personal visit." Nano stood up, expressionless, and said, "See yourselves out. The orphanage does not welcome root members. If you don't leave, I'll call the police force." Chapter 148, Black Zetsu's headache. After being firmly rejected by Nano, the root ninjas left the orphanage with some grunting noises. They hadn't expected Nano to have the courage to refuse Denzo's invitation, and on top of that, she threatened them with both the 4th Hokage and the Uchiha police force, leaving them speechless. Watching the root ninjas' retreating figures, Nano's feelings were a bit complex. She knew that her words would inevitably reach Denzo's ears, which would certainly anger the advisor lurking in the shadows. However, she had no other choice but to stand up for herself and the children in the orphanage. There was no way she could just watch as the children were forced into the root organization, subjected to its brutal training, and ultimately transformed into Denzo's cold, obedient killing machines. Luckily, the newly appointed 4th Hokage had been curbing Denzo's power recently, leaving him unable to directly interfere with the orphanage. Otherwise, it would have been Denzo himself who would have come today. Nano could only hope that this fragile peace would last long enough for the children to develop their own ability to defend themselves. With a sigh, Nano composed herself and left the room, determined to put on a warm smile for the children who had suffered so much injustice. As she left, Kabuto emerged from the shadows, his expression unreadable. After overhearing the conversation between the root ninjas and Nano, he had dispelled his doubts about her. He now understood her much better, but also became increasingly concerned for the future of the orphanage. It turned out that Nano was indeed a ninja, known by the codename Walking Priestess. And as he had feared, the orphanage had originally been established by Root to gather children. The previous generations of orphans had all been forced to join Root. However, in Kabuto's generation, Nano had defied her orders and refused to hand them over. But in doing so, she must have been under tremendous pressure. The smiles she gave them every day were just her way of shielding them from her own burdens. Taking a deep breath, Kabuto tried to steady his thoughts. His mind raced, searching for ways to protect Nano and his fellow orphans. Eventually, he turned his gaze toward the dark corners of the room and asked slowly, "Senpai, is there anything you can do to save the orphanage?" Byakuya stepped out from the shadows and looked at Kabuto. "Your headmistress is here to protect the orphanage. It's not your place to worry. Instead of concerning yourself with things you can't control, you should focus on completing the tasks I've given you." Kabuto shook his head, insisting, "If you don't step in, the headmistress won't be able to hold out for long. Besides, didn't you approach me precisely because you already knew about the orphanage's situation?" Hearing this, Byakuya looked surprised. Kabuto, destined to become a future scientific genius, was already showing his sharp observation skills. He had realized that Byakuya had sought him out intentionally, and now Kabuto was starting to bargain with him. But, if Kabuto weren't this smart, Byakuya wouldn't have picked him in the first place. After a moment of silence, Byakuya gazed at Kabuto and chuckled, "I'm not a Hidden Leaf Village ninja. I can't help your headmistress or your orphanage, but, oh dear me, I can give you the power to change your situation. The question is, how can I trust you not to betray me?" Kabuto hesitated, unable to offer any guarantee. Seeing the uncertainty in Kabuto's expression, Byakuya chuckled and said, "I'm just messing with you. I already planned to help you become a Hidden Leaf Village ninja. But your current strength is far too weak. You're not capable of doing anything yet." With that, Byakuya tossed a few scrolls to Kabuto and disappeared back into the shadows. "These are some basic ninjutsu. Practice them when you get the chance. I'll check on your progress in a few days." Kabuto accepted the scrolls, casting a glance at Byakuya's retreating figure. No matter what Byakuya might ask of him in the future, Kabuto was determined to train diligently and become a valuable ninja. After leaving Kabuto's side, Byakuya closed his eyes. Although his main body had left him with a significant amount of chakra, it wasn't enough to keep him active for long periods. Most of the day, he had to remain in a dormant state, only waking when necessary. Just as he was about to slip back into dormancy, he heard a familiar sound and quickly opened his eyes. A few seconds later, Black Zetsu appeared before Byakuya's clone, his gaze fixed on him. "Byakuya, I didn't expect you to leave a clone in Hidden Leaf Village and start mingling with the orphans in the orphanage." Byakuya's expression remained unchanged. "I'm merely using the necessary means to gather intelligence on Hidden Leaf Village, Black Zetsu-senpai. But what about you and the masked man? How are your preparations coming along? Last time we met, he was planning to target the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki." At the mention of this, Black Zetsu's face darkened. He had never wanted to go after the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki at this time. Success or failure would only alert the other major villages, and Hidden Leaf Village would surely retaliate with its full force. But Obito had stubbornly stayed in Hidden Leaf Village, determined to capture the Nine-Tails. Seeing Black Zetsu fall silent, Byakuya pressed further. "Black Zetsu-senpai, has there been an issue with the masked man?" Isn't he supposed to be under your command? Why not give him an order? Black Zetsu's expression grew even more unpleasant. He had no real control over Obito. With Obito's mastery of the space-time technique Kami, it was nearly impossible for Black Zetsu to track or restrain him, even with his own abilities. But unwilling to show weakness in front of Byakuya, he replied stiffly, "The matter of the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki is already in motion. If the masked man wants to steal the spotlight, so be it. It'll be a good test to see how much his strength has improved over the past few months." Byakuya feigned surprise. "So that's how you see it, Black Zetsu-senpai. The masked man may be reckless, but he hasn't faced any real challenges. After this failure, he'll start showing proper respect to veterans like us. But if the masked man does finalize a time to attack the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, I would appreciate it if you let me know. There are some things I'd like to do in Hidden Leaf Village during that time." Black Zetsu's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What do you plan to do?" Obito's insistence on attacking the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki was already giving Black Zetsu enough of a headache. If Byakuya used the chaos to act in a way that jeopardized their long-term plans, Black Zetsu's goal of reviving his mother could be delayed for decades. Byakuya chuckled softly. "Oh, nothing much. Didn't I tell you before that I once robbed the Hidden Grass Village offices? I'm just thinking of seeing if there's an opportunity to rob the Hokage's office this time. But worry not, Black Zetsu-senpai. As long as the masked man makes enough of a scene, I'll be just fine. And even if something goes wrong, I'll only lose a clone at most. No big deal." Hearing this, Black Zetsu's imaginary forehead marks deepened, but he said nothing more other than cursing his luck for unable to control these children. Chapter 149, Before the Hero's Grave. Upon hearing that Byakuya only intended to rob the Hokage's office during Obito's attack, Black Zetsu breathed a sigh of relief. Normally, robbing the Hokage's office would certainly arouse Hidden Leaf Village's suspicion, but if timed during the chaos of Obito's assault, it would be a minor issue. Still, both Byakuya and Obito were slipping further and further out of his control. Obito, in particular, not only ignored his commands but even had the audacity to order him around, which frustrated Black Zetsu to his core. Although he was ostensibly acting on Madara's will, his true identity was Kaguya's child, deserving far more respect. "I'll inform you when the time comes," Black Zetsu finally replied. "But keep this clone well hidden. If Hidden Leaf Village starts suspecting anything, you could be in danger. You're my most valuable asset." After offering this encouragement, Black Zetsu used his Mayfly technique and vanished from sight. Once he sensed Black Zetsu's chakra fading, Byakuya's face twisted into a scornful expression. He then glanced toward the Hokage building and became lost in thought. These past few days, Byakuya had observed the actions of the fourth Hokage closely. If Minato could maintain his reforms for a decade or more, Hidden Leaf Village could very well overcome its internal issues and regain its dominance over the other villages. But, unfortunately, Minato didn't have that much time left. Kushina's belly was growing larger, and the birth of the prophesied child, Naruto, was drawing near. When both internal strife and external threats arrived simultaneously, it would test Minato's capabilities like never before. Byakuya found himself eagerly anticipating that day, the moment when Hidden Leaf Village would transition from its peak into decline. When that time came, he would advance his plans, strengthening the Akatsuki under his command. However, a simple clash between teacher and student might be too dull. It needed something more exciting. With a smile playing on his lips, Byakuya began moving toward the Hokage's office, disappearing into the shadows. While Byakuya prepared for the night of the Nine-Tails rampage, the instigator of the attack, Obito, was making his own preparations. Since the departure of the Hidden Rain Village delegation, Obito had finalized his plans to assault the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. He had been preparing for this for a long time, waiting for the perfect moment. During his wait, he witnessed the reforms Minato was implementing in Hidden Leaf Village and observed the reactions of the Hidden Leaf Village shinobi. Drawing from his experiences in Hidden Rain Village, Obito understood that Minato's reforms were beneficial for the village. However, Hidden Leaf Village's shinobi reacted in various ways. Most didn't seem to care, while a small faction opposed Minato's changes. Their attitudes weren't based on what was best for the village, but rather on whether it benefited them personally. If the reforms promised them more power or wealth, they'd support them. If it threatened their standing, they'd oppose it, even if the reforms were ultimately good for Hidden Leaf Village. The only exception was when opposing the reforms would cause them to lose even more. From his detached perspective, Obito saw through Hidden Leaf Village's true nature and mocked the so-called will of fire. He had once believed in that ideal, dreaming of protecting his comrades and becoming Hokage. But that version of himself had died on the battlefield, and Rin, who had shared that belief, had followed him to the grave. Meanwhile, Those who paid lip service to the will of fire, without ever truly caring about their comrades, continued to thrive in the shinobi world. These months in Hidden Leaf Village had exposed its hypocrisy, further cementing Obito's resolve to carry out the Eye of the Moon plan. With a cold sneer, Obito arrived at the hero memorial. Compared to the noisy streets of Hidden Leaf Village, he preferred the quiet of the memorial. Here, he could momentarily forget his past and the impending attack on the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, retreating back to the carefree afternoons when Rin would pat his head, allowing him to nap without a care in the world. Obito's brief moment of calm was abruptly interrupted by approaching footsteps. Using his Kamui Sharingan to shift his position, he observed the intruder, a familiar figure carrying flowers and offerings. His eyes narrowed in displeasure. The uninvited guest was none other than Kakashi, his former friend. Watching Kakashi approach the graves of both himself and Rin, offering his respects and mumbling softly to the memorial stones, Obito's expression darkened, his eyes filled with cold malice. Over the past few months, Obito had gathered valuable information from Kakashi's mutterings, everything from Kushina's daily routines to the timing of her pregnancy. Yet, every time Kakashi stood before Rin's grave and muttered apologies, Obito couldn't help but clench his fists in anger. He understood that Rin had chosen to die by Kakashi's hand to protect the village. But why, Kakashi? Why couldn't you refuse her? Why couldn't you forsake the village for Rin's sake? Did you not trust in Minato's abilities, or in the power of your comrades? These thoughts always plunged Obito deeper into bitterness, fueling his hatred for the cruel world that had taken Rin away. This world, with its hellish realities, had killed her. Hidden Mist Village, Hidden Leaf Village, Minato, and Kakashi were all responsible for Rin's death, and they all had to pay for it. If the Eye of the Moon plan wasn't realized, if a world free from pain wasn't created, then even if Rin were to be resurrected, she'd still be trapped in this wretched existence. The same tragedies would happen again and again, an endless cycle of suffering. As Obito stewed in these thoughts, Kakashi continued his one-sided conversation at the gravesite. Rin, Obito, after this visit, it might be a month before I can come again. Obito's ears perked up at that. Unaware that he was being eavesdropped on, Kakashi continued, but don't worry, I'm not going on a dangerous mission. I've been assigned to protect Kushina-sama. Kushina-sama and Minato-sensei's child is about to be born, and we've decided to have the birth take place outside the village to keep it secret from everyone. With this, Kakashi revealed the secret about Kushina's childbirth. Oblivious to the weight of the information he'd just shared, he continued to talk, reminiscing about recent events and sharing light-hearted stories involving Guy and others, as though reassuring Rin and Obito that he wasn't alone. After finishing his conversation with the graves, Kakashi gave one last look at the hero memorial, finally feeling unburdened. He turned and left, feeling lighter than before. Kushina-sama's teachings were indeed effective, speaking his heart out had made him feel at peace. People needed to look forward, not be stuck in the past forever. After the mission to protect Kushina was over, he would assist Minato-sensei and fulfill the dreams Rin and Obito never got to realize. He would explore this beautiful shinobi world with a renewed sense of hope. While Kakashi walked away, his spirits lifted, Obito's face remained cold and menacing. Once Kakashi was out of sight, Obito appeared before his own gravestone, picking up the white flowers left in tribute. He crushed them in his hand, the petals crumbling into dust. Kakashi. Obito muttered to himself with barely contained fury, you have no right to offer tributes to Rin or me. Chapter 150, The Night of the Nine-Tails, Part 1. Several weeks passed in the blink of an eye, and the day of Kushina's childbirth had arrived. Kushina's status was extremely special. She wasn't just the wife of the fourth Hokage, but also Hidden Leaf Village's Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tails. To ensure Kushina's safety during childbirth, Hidden Leaf Village had been preparing for months. Not only had they assigned a significant number of elite Anbu to protect her, but they had also secretly relocated her to a secure Anbu base outside the village. The highest level of protection was put in place to guarantee that childbirth would go smoothly and without any issues. Listening to the sounds coming from the birthing room, Minato's face was filled with worry. In the Hokage office, he was the decisive Hokage, but here, he didn't even have the privilege of entering the birthing room. All he could do was anxiously pace outside, awaiting the outcome. After all, while he was skilled in defeating enemies, his abilities in childbirth were far inferior to those of a professional midwife. Seeing Minato's growing anxiety, Shikakunara, who was waiting quietly nearby, reassured him. Captain Minato, don't worry. Although Biweko-sama isn't a medical specialist, she has plenty of experience in childbirth. Both Kushina and the baby will be fine. Hearing the comforting words of his friend, Minato's expression eased a little, but deep inside, he remained highly tense. Kushina was not just his wife, she was also the village's Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tails. In the entire shinobi world, there were plenty of people who would want to strike while Kushina was in a weakened state. After all, if someone attacked Kushina now, not only could they deal a heavy blow to Minato himself, but they could also weaken Hidden Leaf Village's power. He still vividly remembered the night more than 10 years ago when he rescued Kushina. Back then, she wasn't even the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, yet she was still coveted by the Hidden Cloud and kidnapped by them. However, the most dangerous threat wasn't the potential enemies, it was the Nine-Tails inside Kushina. The Nine-Tails was the strongest of all the tailed beasts, including the fact that it was Hidden Leaf Village's strategic weapon for maintaining balance in the shinobi world. If the Nine-Tails went berserk during Kushina's weakened state, it would put her life in extreme danger. Even though both he and the village had prepared for such a scenario, Minato couldn't help but worry. With these thoughts weighing on him, Minato let out a soft sigh, scanning his surroundings with increased vigilance. He wished this night would pass quickly, but it seemed to crawl by painfully slowly. Sensing Minato's anxiety, Kushina, lying in the birthing room, furrowed her brow. She turned her head to the kind-faced elderly Kunoichi beside her and said softly, "Biweko-sama, how much longer will it take?" The woman Kushina referred to as Biweko-sama was none other than Biweko Saratobi, the wife of the third Hokage. Even though there had been some ideological competition between the third Hokage and the fourth Hokage over Minato's reform plans, in important matters like the birth of a Jinchuriki, the third Hokage was highly attentive and had sent his own wife to assist. Biweko glanced at Kushina, who was drenched in sweat, and smiled. "Oh, we're not even halfway there. Childbirth lasting several hours is completely normal. I've also even seen some cases last an entire day. But my dear, you've always been so strong, I'm sure you'll get through this smoothly." Hearing this, Kushina nodded slightly. Although she wished Minato could be by her side, she trusted Biweko-sama's judgment. After all, Biweko was a seasoned senior who had already given birth to 2 children herself. While Minato and Kushina were both on edge, Obito, lurking near the base, was also silently waiting. His gaze was calm, showing neither joy nor sorrow, as he stared at the birthing room from a distance, deep in thought. The reason he hadn't made a move yet wasn't due to hesitation about whether to attack. Rather, he was waiting for the perfect opportunity, an ideal moment to create a distraction and draw Minato's attention away, allowing him to directly strike at the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, Kushina. After all, while Obito's power was considerable, he still harbored some fear when facing his former sensei. Especially since Minato-sensei had mastered the Flying Thunder God technique, which posed a significant threat to his Kamui Sharingan. However, there was no need for him to engage in a direct confrontation with Minato-sensei. He only needed to wait for the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki to be at her weakest, which was undoubtedly right after childbirth. Now, all he had to do was wait patiently. In the streets of Hidden Leaf Village, Kakashi gazed at the bustling streets while occasionally glancing toward the direction of the Anbu base. Unlike the quietness of the base a few kilometers away, the streets of Hidden Leaf Village were full of life. Villagers and shinobi filled the vibrant streets, making it look no different from daytime. Over the past few months, since the fourth Hokage had taken office and implemented a series of policies, the environment of Hidden Leaf Village had greatly improved. Even the typically proud Uchiha had started showing smiles when resolving conflicts. Just 3 days ago, Kakashi had completed his mission to protect Kushina, his sensei's wife, and was granted a rare break. However, during this hard-earned break, he found himself at a loss for what to do and ended up wandering aimlessly through the streets. At that moment, the thick-browed Might Guy approached Kakashi with a challenge. "Maybe another day. I don't have time right now." Kakashi politely declined Guy's challenge, though his gaze remained fixed on the direction of the Anbu base. Normally, he would have the energy to spar with Guy, but today was a special day. His thoughts were entirely preoccupied with Kushina-sensei's childbirth, leaving him unable to focus on anything else. What he didn't understand was why Minato-sensei and Kushina had ended his mission in the final days, leaving him only to wait here in anxious anticipation, unable to do anything. Seeing Kakashi turn down his offer, Might Guy's expression dimmed briefly, but it was soon replaced by a smile. After all, Kakashi had finally agreed to spar with him, even if it was later. In just a few days, he'd get the chance to test their skills and see how much of a gap remained between them. Still, Kakashi always seemed to have that melancholic look. When would he finally show a smile? Guy recalled the time when he was ordered by the Hokage to tail Kakashi. If he hadn't intervened and driven off the enemy, Kakashi might not be alive right now. With that in mind, Guy caught up to Kakashi, deciding to show his concern for his friend by staying close. Just then, a gentle breeze blew by, and both Guy and Kakashi instinctively looked toward the Hokage rock. A full moon hung above the massive monument, casting an eerie glow. Tonight's moon was large and bright. But despite its beauty, both Guy and Kakashi froze in place, a sense of foreboding filling their hearts. They had the unsettling feeling that something major was about to happen. In the very next moment, a mountain-sized beast appeared just outside the borders of Hidden Leaf Village. Chapter 151, The Night of the Ninetales, Part 2, Inside the Anbu Base. As the sound of a baby's cries echoed, Biwako Saratobi approached Kushina and the fourth Hokage, cradling the newborn in her arms. While handing the baby to his parents, she smiled. "Congratulations, fourth Hokage, it's a boy. Also, both mother and child are safe. But what do you plan to name him? I'd love to know," she added. Kushina, looking weak as she held her baby, responded along with Minato, "His name is Naruto, the same as the protagonist in Jiraiya-sensei's book." The protagonist from Jiraiya's book. Biwako's expression turned a bit strange. Although she hadn't read Jiraiya's books, she knew they contained content inappropriate for children. Was it really a good idea to name a child after a character from such a book? Noticing her thoughts, Minato smiled and explained, "Yes, in Jiraiya-sensei's book, Naruto saves the world. I hope our child can do the same." Hearing this, Biwako realized she had misunderstood. After a brief chat, Biwako began explaining postpartum care and newborn concerns to the couple. Once finished, she headed out of the delivery room. However, at that moment, a vortex appeared inside the room. Obito, masked, swiftly killed Biwako with a single strike. He then appeared before Kushina and snatched Naruto from her arms, muttering to himself, "So, it's a boy. I've waited so long for this." Minato, who had just realized what was happening, glared at Obito and demanded, "Who are you?" Obito glanced at Minato and coldly replied, "Fourth Hokage, who I am doesn't matter. What matters is that your child is in my hands. I'm curious, if both your wife and child are in danger at the same time, which will you save first?" With that, Obito threw the baby into the air and lunged toward Kushina. Kushina, still weak, couldn't stop Obito from approaching her. All she could do was look at Minato, sending him a silent plea with her eyes. Understanding her signal, Minato vanished in an instant, catching the baby. Just as he was about to save Kushina, the baby's blanket began to glow with explosive tags. Without hesitation, Minato teleported Naruto out of the delivery room. A series of explosions echoed within the Anbu base. Upon hearing the commotion, Shikaku Nara and other ninjas appeared before Minato. Seeing Minato's grim expression and glancing at the blown-up delivery room in the distance, Shikaku quickly asked, "Minato, where did the enemy attack from? I didn't notice anything wrong here." Minato, with a dark expression, replied, "The attacker has mastered space-time ninjutsu and has taken Kushina. You all need to notify the third Hokage for backup. I'm going to capture the attacker." But before Shikaku even finished speaking, Minato used the Flying Thunder God technique and vanished, leaving only a flash of light in his wake. Watching Minato disappear, Shikaku and the Anbu ninjas exchanged stunned looks. Could there really be another ninja besides the fourth Hokage who had mastered space-time ninjutsu? However, there was no time to dwell on this. They had to immediately inform the third Hokage and other village leaders. While the enemy seemed to only be targeting Kushina, their real goal was likely Hidden Leaf Village itself. On the way to the Hokage's office, Shikaku and his team were suddenly struck with fear when they saw a mountain-sized figure looming in the distance. After the legendary battle between the first Hokage and Madara Uchiha in the Valley of the End, the most powerful of the tailed beasts, the Ninetales, had once again appeared before everyone, and this time, as an enemy. The Ninetales was no ordinary beast. Its 9 tails, resembling giant serpents, could easily flatten a small forest with just a casual swing. Its claws and fangs could tear apart mountains and halt roaring rivers. Seeing this terrifying scene, Shikaku realized he had to stop the Ninetales from entering the village. If the Ninetales were to enter the heart of Hidden Leaf Village, the consequences would be unimaginable, with countless villagers falling victim to its rampage. If it were just him alone, even delaying the Ninetales would be impossible. Fortunately, Choza Akimaki and Inoyachi Yamanaka were nearby. With the Inoshikacho trio gathered, while they couldn't stop the Ninetales, they could at least buy some time. After instructing his subordinates to notify the third Hokage, Shikaku found Choza and Inoyachi. The 3 elite jonin of Hidden Leaf Village exchanged glances and immediately unleashed their signature techniques, shouting toward the distant Ninetales, "Ninja Art, Shadow Imitation Jutsu. Ninja Art, Multi-Size Jutsu. Ninja Art, Mind Transfer Jutsu." In an instant, Shikaku's shadow connected with the ground at a rapid speed, linking his shadow with the Ninetales, slowing the beast's movements for half a second. Seizing the opportunity, Inoyachi controlled the Ninetales' body and began directing it away from the village. Meanwhile, Choza, Having completed his multi-size jutsu, rushed forward to grapple with the Ninetales, using his enormous body to engage the beast in a fierce struggle. For a brief moment, the combined efforts of the Inoshikacho trio managed to hold the Ninetales in place. However, Shikakunara wasn't optimistic. He, Choza, and Inoichi could feel their chakra draining visibly, and they knew they could only maintain this effort for another 10 seconds or so. On the other hand, the Ninetales' chakra seemed nearly infinite, capable of fighting until sunrise without breaking a sweat. With a tremendous roar, the Ninetales broke free of the shadow imitation jutsu, expelling Inoichi from its mind, and pushing Choza aside, continuing its advance toward the heart of Hidden Leaf Village. Drenched in sweat, the Inoshikacho trio seemed to make a resolute decision, charging forward once more.